Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this forum of the Democratic candidates running for mayor. Before we begin, I want to introduce Cordelia Montes of Linguistic Justice to make an announcement. Cordelia?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cordelia Montes, and my partner Irene and I are here to ensure linguistic justice for your Spanish-speaking community. And in order to do that, we need your cooperation. Remember, this is not about making our jobs easier. It's about making sure that everybody is on equal footing, that we are all having the same experience. So here are some tips on how you can help us achieve that. First of all, choose your language at the bottom right of your screen. If you are on a computer, you should be able to see an icon of a globe that says interpretation at the bottom. Please do so now. You can click and choose either English or Spanish. Regardless of your language preference, in order for interpretation to work, all participants must choose their language. Second, this is very important. Speakers need to slow down significantly. Be aware that everything that you are saying is being interpreted simultaneously. And this means the interpreter will always be a few seconds behind. We suggest that you take a pause between each sentence. Third, please refrain from reading. Reading pace tends to be much faster than conversational pace, and it is not possible for interpreters to keep up with a reading pace. If you must do so, slow down significantly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cordelia. So I want to welcome everyone again. My name is Rich Bennett, and I'm the president of Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats. We have a very impressive lineup this evening, and I think many of you will be hearing from candidates you may not know at all, as well as hearing more from some of the candidates you do already know. So this forum will be split up into two sections. The first, moderated by Jessica Thurston, and the second, moderated by Nye Whitaker and Gloria Pazmino. For all of those following along at home and on Twitter, on Instagram maybe, we're using the hashtag BK Mayoral Forum. And please tweet out about what people are saying and what you're hearing. That's BK Mayoral Forum. So, as I had said before, we'll be splitting up the forum into two sections. A few technical announcements. We also have the option to watch with closed captioning during the forum, which should automatically appear if you're watching on Zoom or YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook and want to use the closed caption feature there, you'll need to hover your mouse above the video, click on the settings wheel, and choose subtitles. One last announcement that pertains only to members of CBID who are watching and will be endorsing after this meeting. If you are attending the meeting on any platform other than Zoom, you must, I repeat, must comment as present on the Facebook stream. Commenting is only possible on the Facebook stream as YouTube comments are unavailable to us. The Facebook stream is accessible at facebook.com/CBIDems. Alrighty, now we'll move on to the action. On the first section, we will be hearing from 7 candidates who will present and speak for 3 minutes. The time limit will be endorsed, And candidates will hear a little sound telling them that they have 15 seconds left. I am going to try and share that sound with you now so you know what it sounds like. You will hear this. And that will tell you that you have 15 seconds left. I may have said 15 minutes. I meant 15 seconds. So let me introduce the moderator for the first part of our forum, Jessica Thurston. She's a VP of Political Affairs for New Kings Democrats, a Brooklyn-based, borough-wide political club that works to reform the Democratic Party to make it more inclusive, accountable, and transparent. So Jessica, go on and take it away.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's really great to be here, and I'm extra appreciative of all the candidates participating tonight. This first section is going to be with 7 candidates that did not meet the same fundraising criteria that the rest of the candidates met tonight, but are still incredibly important for us all to hear from. On behalf of New Kings Democrats, I just want to also thank everyone that helped to organize this. It's truly a borough-wide, Brooklyn-wide effort. So what I'm going to do is introduce each candidate and ask them to please speak and introduce themselves for the 3 minutes. I'll hold up a finger, my pen, when you have a minute left, but otherwise, please listen for that sound that Rich shared. We have a very tight schedule tonight and hope that we can all just respect the time limits and make sure everyone is heard. And again, in those 3 minutes, candidates, please feel free to introduce yourselves, your campaigns, your candidacy, anything you want to share with people across Brooklyn and beyond. We came up with the order of the following 7 candidates randomly. So it'll be a wonderful surprise. No, but I think the candidates know. So with that, we'll turn it over to our first of 7 candidates for this round, Eddie Cullen, who is from the Bronx and a professor and founder of Impact USA. Eddie, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Edward Cullen, and I am a Bronx native. I grew up in Manhattan to a 32 BJ union worker. My mom worked for a small business. I went to Xavier High School, Fordham University, completed a Jesuit volunteer corps year, living on $85 a month, working with the homeless and teaching. Following that, I played professional rugby or semi-professional rugby in Australia, came back and then worked for a company called Company.co as the first employee and helped build a 1 million square foot skyscraper into a Silicon Valley type model. After that, I was a founder of Bronx.tech, a corporate consulting firm. Then, unfortunately, I faced some tragedy. My father had a sudden heart attack on Christmas morning, December 2018, and passed away in front of me a few days later on January 2nd. We held his funeral on January 8th, which was the first Oval Office speech from the current president, Donald Trump. And I watched that and wanted to go back to my roots of working on the US-Mexico border. And for the last 2 years, I've been working on that. I worked on the Biden campaign. So I was in Iowa for the 3 months in the caucus. I came back and I also continued working on my company and then had a 2020 story where I was trapped in my apartment in the Bronx.
Eddie, if you could slow your pace down a bit to help with interpreters. Thank you so much. Please keep going.
Absolutely. So I ended up throwing the Harlem Tech Summit at techsummitseries.com, where I brought together a community of people to collaborate in Harlem on technology events. And through the success of that, I was able to speak with some of my friends in New York and decided to run for mayor, mostly because I was shocked into action. And all I want to do is help. And, you know, that is just who I am and have a history of helping. Obviously, I'm the youngest, I think I'm the youngest candidate in the race. I would be the 3rd youngest mayor in our history if I won. The first being Hugh John Grant. And then the second being, I believe, Purray Mitchell, I think John Purray Mitchell. And then I would be the 3rd if inaugurated. I know I have a limited time here, so I would like to make 5 announcements based on what we've been working on. I'm an entrepreneur and a teacher, not a politician. I've put in the Facebook chat 5 events that we've started to bring out. One of them being what is inclusive capitalism and why do we need it with the Vatican? And we are going to talk about inclusive capitalism, artificial intelligence, and what that means. The second is a digital platform for citywide financial inclusion, the Boloro system, two-way Amber Alert to save 85% of our current budget. Third, dispelling the opportunity zone myth, which is our homelessness solution, 300 opportunity zone tracks for affordable housing and homelessness. And the last two, mental health awareness, the biggest hurdles in New York, which is a collaboration with my friend, Harlem entrepreneur and faith leader, Jamel Anderson. And the fifth, turning New York City into the global capital of sustainability with environmental and international renewable energy leader, Luciano Castillo. So the difference between me, and I'm gonna end now, is I'm practical, I act, I'm not a politician, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm gonna be in the trenches. I didn't fundraise because I was working on solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. As someone who works full-time in sustainability, I appreciate that. Next up is Paperboy Love Prince. Paper is a Brooklyn-based rapper, and their campaign is about spreading love. Paper, over to you.
Paper, yeah. It's our time. One love. I love you so much. Gracias a todos. Muchas gracias. The people are hurting right now. They need love. They need bold action. People locked up, hurt by the police. More people starving than ever before. More people on the verge of homelessness than ever before. Small businesses being wiped out. I'm Paperboy Love Prince, an artist, athlete, activist, small business owner, and I'm fired up. I'm ready to fight for you. We shocked the world and held the establishment accountable with our campaign for Congress. We organized peaceful protests that brought thousands together for justice. No one else here did that. Many of the candidates are speaking from Wall Street. As a street performer, a rapper, I'm coming from our streets, the streets of New York, ready to spread love. I've been fighting for UBI and NYC for over 2 years, not just around the political elite, but around the people who need it the most. We need healthcare for all. We need housing for all. We need to cancel rent and mortgages for the people and for small businesses. We need more futuristic schools. We need a greener New York. We need to legalize marijuana and psychedelics. We need to give reparations to Black and brown people for the drug war. We need to abolish the police and replace them with a love team that focuses on love instead of force and is community-based. We need to spread love. Ha, Paper, yeah. RIP to Pop Smoke, let's go. Hey. Hey, we gotta cancel the rent. We need UBI. We need healthcare. We need to spread more love. Legalize marijuana. Futuristic schools. Greener NYC. And coronavirus. Shout out Alice Eva for donating to our campaign. Paperboy, yeah, I'm spreading love. Need more love in the city. Yeah. Paper, yeah. Sorry, I had to just illustrate that to y'all in music one time. Probably woke up my roommate a little bit there. But I also want to reach the youth. I want to reach the whole city with sounds that actually connect with them. Now, to address food insecurity in New York City, I'm calling out all the other candidates. Sean Donovan, Andrew Yang, Maya Wiley, who else is there? Eric Adams, all of the other candidates, I'm calling you out. Let's have a pie to the face contest. Let's take a pie to the face and we're gonna raise money for food insecurity by how many pies that we take to the face. Thank you all so much for having me. You can donate at paperboyprince.com. You can donate at paperboyprince.com. All the candidates, I'm calling you out. Let's take a pie to the face to stop the starvation that's happening in New York City. Let's cancel the rent and let's spread more love. Ha, Paper, yeah. One love. Thank you so much.
Paper, thank you. Thank you for sticking to the 3 minutes. I appreciate you. Third of our 7 candidates to start off the night is Aaron Foldenauer. Aaron, I tried several times to pronounce your name correctly, and I apologize if I messed that up. But Aaron is an environmental advocate and lawyer. Aaron, over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Aaron Fuldenauer. I am an environmental advocate and candidate for mayor of New York City. And I want to use the start of my time to express my concern as to the format of this forum. At this point, we are in group 1 of a limited group of 7 candidates, and all of the remaining candidates, the establishment candidates, are now in a different section of the forum. These are candidates who have broken ideas and who have run this city into the ground. We were told by the organizers of this forum at the start of the debate that this was based on some fundraising threshold that we were never told about. In fact, that strikes as pay to play at its worst, which is why the city is so broken and why we can't find new ideas. And in fact, here, the fundraising threshold has not even been fairly applied. Andrew Yang just filed his most recent campaign filing. Andrew Yang raised only $4,726. I, Aaron Foldenauer, raised more than 3 times that. So Andrew, if I didn't make the threshold, then Andrew Yang also clearly did not make the fundraising threshold, and he should be here in group 1 if he didn't meet this objective fundraising threshold. Yet these clubs, in addition to applying this pay-to-play threshold, have also made an exception for Andrew Yang. And it's a total outrage to make an exception for Andrew Yang, because Andrew Yang, as his voting record reveals, hasn't even voted in most New York City elections. I, Aaron Foldenauer, I ran for city council here in District 1 in 2017. I raised money. I qualified for public matching funds. That's something that Andrew Yang and many of the other candidates have never done. In fact, many of the other candidates have never run for office before at all, and they are mere members of the political establishment. So we have a problem with the way this forum is set up. It's totally unfair, and it's little wonder why New York City politics are so broken. My name is Aaron Foldenauer. I'm an environmental advocate. My website is at aaronfornyc.com. It's time for new ideas, and it's time to get rid of the broken political establishment and the unfairness with this forum and the failure to acknowledge a true debate, and ask the moderators right now to open up the forum to all of the candidates so that we can have a free and fair debate today. Thank you. My name's Aaron Foldenauer. I'm running for mayor.
Thanks, Aaron. Heard and noted. Next up is Joycelyn Taylor. Joycelyn is from Brooklyn. Hello. And has an incredible focus on Nycha and affordable housing in her campaign. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank the Democratic Club, Brooklyn Democratic Club, for including me in this forum. Have to piggyback a little bit off of what Aaron said, because, you know, we can't continue to do the same things and expect different results. If we want different results, we have to give the people an opportunity to hear all of the candidates in a full forum. But nonetheless, my name is Joycelyn Taylor, and I am running to become the 110th mayor of New York, as well as the first Black woman to hold the position of mayor in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in Pink Houses, which is a Nycha development in East New York. I've gone to public school here. I've worked for the State Division of Housing. I've attended college right here in Brooklyn at LIU. I've gone on to work for Fortune 500 companies, as well as own my own business in this city, which I must say, if you are a minority or small business owner that's tried to do business with the city of New York, you know how challenging that is. So as someone who has lived in this city all my life, I love New York. From the Yankees to the Mets, from the Knicks to the Nets, this is my city. And I'm running for mayor because, quite frankly, I'm tired. I'm tired of the excuses, and I'm tired of the inaction. We have found ways to legislatively tie our hands and keep government from doing the right thing by people. Everyday citizens of this city are doing their part. They're investing in the city every day. But the reality of the situation is that they're not seeing a return on that investment, nor are they seeing any appreciation or respect for their power that they've relinquished to the leadership in the city. And it's past time for that to change. Every policy, procedure, and law in this city has been implemented by an ordinary man or woman who was doing the best they could with the information that they had at the time. But in this moment, a lot of those decisions and policies are not working. They're actually helping to create a system that doesn't work to support people or allow people to feel lifted up and live a purposeful life. So I'm running for mayor because whether you believe in God, spirit, universe, Allah, Jehovah, they created heavens and earth. And we took that and we created food insecurity. We created homelessness, a failing education system, and a climate crisis. And if we want to change the, it's going to take someone who's willing to say and do the hard things so that someone has the firsthand lived experience of everyday New Yorkers. We need leadership in this city that's not going to fight, but going to work together to get New York City where it needs to be. And that's to a place of inclusiveness and transparency. We need a mayor who's going to be hardworking.
Joycelyn, thank you so much.
Thank you. You can find my website at taylor42021.com. I hope you support. I look forward to earning your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to the next candidate, just a reminder to all candidates to please speak slowly. I know it's a lifelong struggle for me, but it will certainly be helpful to the interpreters this evening. So next up is Isaac Wright. Isaac inspired the ABC show For Life and is a lawyer and says he's from almost every borough. Isaac, I'll turn it over to you. Although I don't see him. Okay, we're going to move ahead. But now you know about Isaac. Next is Quanda Francis. Quanda calls herself the progressive voice of the people. She's from Brooklyn and is a PhD candidate at Long Island University. Quanda, over to you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'd like to first say thank you all for having me. And once again, apologize for the mess. I'm sitting in a hotel. I want to open up this statement with stating that I am running for mayor of New York City because my father-in-law inspired me to be the change that I seek. And right now, New Yorkers are hurting. We had 24,000 plus New Yorkers that have died as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second part of that is that our elected officials were not prepared. And we now have a situation where a lack of preparedness has now caused a domino effect in a number of different areas. But the issues that we have not, they don't exist in a vacuum. We've had them for over 200 years in terms of issues with economic inequality. And I want to piggyback on what Aaron stated about the two sets of forums. A lot of the elected officials, they've held public office. They have had the opportunity to produce a leadership, an agile government that is able to position New York to be the global city that it is. And I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Brooklyn, and I like to call myself a casualty of a number of politicians that have been in office for the last 30 years. I grew up in a housing project, had family members that were victims of gun violence. I dropped out of high school, and I want to bring this home in terms of dropping out of high school, because I was someone that went to public schools in a different area than my mother and I would get on the train and we would travel from District 23 to District 13 so I can have a quality education. So in 1994, which is when I graduated from middle school, the high stakes testing, that was a bad day for me. Why? Because I had someone that was a victim of gun violence. But yet I sat and I took that test and I did not perform well. And so I went to a high school, and as a result of that, dropped out with only earning 3 high school credits. And I like to bring that home because I graduated from NYU, did not take one remedial course. So I would say that our education system has failed us. Leadership in the city has failed us. So I'm Quanda Francis. I'm running for mayor of New York City. And I hope that you would consider me because I am the smartest, most prepared candidate, agile candidate, and we need new leadership to bring us into the 21st century. Thank you.
Wanda, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here tonight. Last, certainly not least, is Art Chang, another Brooklynite business person who worked on NYC votes. Art, over to you.
Great. So first, I want to thank the Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats and all the other sponsors for hosting this. I'm delighted to be here. Our city isn't working right now for everyone because it's designed to work only for a few. We need to redesign our city so that it can work for all of us. On 9/11, my infant son, Ben, was in childcare at the World Trade Center. I was in Midtown at work when I saw the first plane hit the building on TV. I knew that Ben was going to be okay because I trusted Karen and Nycha, his childcare providers. Hours later, when I found him, Ben was safe. I want every family to have that experience. That's why I believe in building a comprehensive universal childcare system. I was born in Jim Crow, Atlanta. I grew up in an all-white school district in Akron, Ohio, where I faced racism on the street and domestic violence at home. I know what it feels like to feel unsafe on the street. I know what it feels like to be wondering whether your mother is going to be alive the next morning. I also know what it's like to fear the police, but also want their help. Every family deserves to feel safe in New York City. That's why I have a plan to transform the police and hold them accountable. When I moved to New York City in 1985, and to Brooklyn specifically, for many years, I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent. Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers today don't know how they're going to pay the rent either. And along with them, many, countless small businesses. That's why I have a COVID-19 plan to end the eviction crisis and to cancel debt for renters, landlords, and business. For the past 30 years, I've been making the impossible possible. From Queens West, I learned how to build the city from the sewers to the streets, to be able to deliver universal broadband, to prepare the city for the climate crises to come, including being the only waterfront project in New York City that stayed on during Hurricane Sandy. From CUNY, the Brooklyn Public Library, and Brooklyn Tech, I know that we can deliver quality education to each and every student where they are. From Safe Horizon and Case Commons, I know how to deliver integrated and coordinated critical government services. As a co-creator of NYC Votes, I know how to strengthen democracy for the entire city. As a technologist, I know how to work from the bottom up, and I know how to deliver government services with transparency and user-friendliness. My platform to redesign the city is comprehensive, bold, and most importantly, possible. Visit chang.nyc to learn more about it, and there you can also schedule a time to come and visit one of my open office hours. I want to end with a quote from Albert Einstein. "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them." I promise to bring different thinking to work every single day as your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Art. We really appreciate you. Appreciate all of the candidates that have joined us so far tonight. Before I hand it back over to Rich, I just want to thank you all again on behalf of New Kings Democrats. You can learn more about us at newkingsdemocrats.com. And just to explain a bit more, because this is complicated, there are going to be 3 more rounds this evening, and it's simply been broken up based on how many candidates there are running for mayor. Fundraising was, of course, one criteria, but there are others. you know, we are all volunteering here, and I will just make a pitch for everyone watching to please consider getting involved in one of the organizations that hosted this tonight, whether it's your neighborhood club, a borough-wide organization, or what have you. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rich.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, and I will piggyback on that with just saying that we wanted to provide an opportunity for all candidates to address Brooklyn voters. But given the scale of the field, we chose to prioritize giving more time to voters candidates who have demonstrated viability through one of three measures, that is fundraising, polling, or holding prior office. That is how we got to the group of 11 candidates who will be speaking in groups after these initial 7. Now, moving on, we are moving to this second section of the forum, which will be in a different style. As I said, we will have 3 separate panels or groups of candidates up at each time who will take questions from our 2 moderators. These questions have been submitted by the various clubs who are co-sponsoring this evening and by members of our various communities. Questions were solicited and submitted via online form, and our moderators have selected and sometimes edited questions for the sake of brevity. Not all questions that were submitted will be asked, but where applicable, the person who asked the question will be noted. The questions will be answered in a round robin style. The groups have been chosen at random, so no preference has been given to any particular candidate. One question or topic will be asked of the full group, sometimes with variations for a particular candidate, and that will go across the panel. We will also end with a little rapid fire or yes or no section at the end. So let me please introduce the 2 moderators for this evening, who I'm very, very pleased to have with us. Gloria Pazmino, who is a City Hall reporter at Spectrum News New York 1, who is a fave of mine and love her Twitter account. And for all those wanting to keep up with what's going to be going on this year in city elections, I recommend seeking her out and following her. And Nycha Whitaker, who is a political strategist, NYU professor, restaurateur, entrepreneur, and who recently served as senior advisor for the Biden-Harris 2020 victory campaign. So I will now pass it along to Nycha and Gloria with our first group of candidates. Nycha and Gloria, are you there?
We're here. Good evening, everyone. So good evening, candidates. We are going to start with the first group, which includes Comptroller Scott Stringer, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and Maya Wiley, who recently served in the de Blasio administration as chief counsel. Each candidate has a minute to introduce themselves, and then we will move on to questions. Mr. Stringer, we will start with you, and then Mr. Adams, and then Ms. Wiley. The floor is yours, Mr. Stringer, to get started. Do we have Comptroller Stringer with us?
He is muted.
Okay. I think, can you hear me now? And you're on mute, right? Or are the 2 key phrases we've learned?
I am unmute. Are you ready for me?
We are ready for you. It's just a quick introduction. You have 1 minute.
All right. Well, thank you, Gloria and I'll speak fast. I'm a New Yorker. Look, I'm running for mayor because we're facing 3 crises at the same time: a public health crisis, an economic crisis, and a social justice crisis. We need a mayor with both the vision and the skills to tackle all 3. Now, we've seen mayors who did not share our progressive values, And we've seen what happens when City Hall is incapable of managing anything really. We shouldn't have to choose. We need a mayor who's going to make New York a more just and equitable place. We need a mayor who's going to manage the hell out of this city. Many of you know me. We've stood together in the fight for affordable housing. We've marched together against police misconduct, and we've offered together policies that make a difference from our city. We fought side by side to take out the so-called Independent Democratic Conference, Democrats who acted like Republicans in Albany, and I stood with all of you in the fight to oppose the IDC. You all know my record. I've stood up to Shelley Silver in the landlord lobby. As Manhattan Borough President, I introduced community-based planning. And as controller, I've divested from private prisons. We're going to divest from fossil fuel. We're going to protect the retirement security of city workers. I've been the chief watchdog of the city financially. And so I know to be mayor is to also understand that it's no time for training wheels. I'm
That's
ready
your
to
time,
go.
Controller. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for your wonderful introduction. We're going to go on to Mr. Adams. You have 1 minute, and as you can see, we're sticking to it. That bell means you have 15 seconds to wrap it up, just in case you were just coming on. Please, Mr. Adams, the floor is yours.
If we don't have the borough president, we should move on to Ms. Wiley.
Great. So, Ms. Wiley, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I am Maya Wiley. I'm running to be the next mayor of New York City as someone who is the child of activists, who knows what it's like to go to a segregated public school, who knows what it's like to watch a neighborhood be displaced. And I'm running because I know that we can be a city where we can all live with dignity. And that experience was not dignity. It means development without displacement. It means a school system that sees every one of our children as excellent. It does mean putting the public back in public safety. And I say this as someone who spent 30 years working to dismantle structural racism as a civil rights lawyer, as a policy advocate, as someone who went into City Hall in 2014 and saw that you can have city government transformational. We got every single apartment in Queensbridge houses free broadband, something the government had never thought about doing before. And there's so much more that we can do that's transformational. I'm running a new deal for New York. We're going to invest in communities, create 100,000 jobs. We're going to bring the police department to heal. It is going to serve and protect, not be violent and disrupt. And we're going to do it together because I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to lead in partnership, because that's the leadership we need in this moment, in this time, that knows and understands what communities are experiencing.
Ms. Wiley, that is your time. I appreciate it. We'll have a little bit more time to expand in the next section. It's my understanding that the borough president has not joined us. I'm going to ask our team to please reach out to him, but I am going to continue to move forward. And it looks like I get to start with the first question. So thank you for those introductions. First and foremost, some of this you might have covered, so I want you to kind of think about what you just said in your opening and kind of redirect it.
Nye,
Yeah.
can I interrupt? Cordelia wants to say again that please have all of the candidates slow down.
Sure.
And also when questions are being asked. Yes, Cordelia? Oh, okay. And Nye and Gloria, if you could also choose your language on the bottom half of the Zoom, you'll be able to hear Cordelia. So a note to the candidates again to please keep it at a slower pace when you're responding. Thank you.
So candidates, there is a language button in the bottom of your Zoom on the right. If you can please click your language of preference so that the translators can do their job. We are here to make sure we support linguistic justice. So thank you. And Cordelia, feel free to summarize what we say. You don't have to say any, type everything or translate everything word for word, just so that we know that there's some content that we want to make sure we capture. Perfect. I agree. As an Afro-Latina, I just happen to talk fast. I don't know what slow down means, but we'll give it a shot. So for our first question of the evening, we want to address the game of politics. Many in politics and public service, when term limited by election law or the end of an appointment, simply move on to the next open political seat in order to maintain power and influence. Each of you has experience in government. Mr. Stringer, you served in the state assembly as Manhattan Borough President and now City Comptroller. I'm going to skip Brother Adams and go to Ms. Wiley, who served as Chief Counsel for Mayor de Blasio's administration and chaired the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Our city is in the middle of a crisis. How can you assure voters that you aren't just looking for the next job in politics? Why are you running for mayor of New York City now, at this point in time? I'm going to start with Ms. Wiley. You have 2 minutes, and as you can see, there will be a bell when you have 15 seconds left, and then we will keep to time. So Ms. Wiley, the floor is yours.
And I'm sorry to interrupt before Ms. Wiley begins, but she needs to select English as her language on the lower right-hand side, or else people won't be able to hear her.
I did select English.
Oh, great. Okay, then you are good. Sorry.
Thank you. Look, I come from a community, not a political machine. I've never run for public office. I believe in public service, and I felt called to this moment, despite having had the tremendous privilege of serving as a lawyer, as an academic, as a policy advocate for literally 27 years of my career, 2.5 of which I was grateful to serve in city government. And what it taught me was that the transformation I had been seeking as an advocate, I saw that it could happen in government, but so much of what got in the way was exactly what this question asked: seeking a political career. I have a career, and it's serving people. I'm called to this moment to actually implement ideas I believe deeply in, that I think will serve people, and to do it with people. I am not going to seek higher office, because for me, there is no higher office than running and being mayor of the city of this miraculous city.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stringer. Why now?
Since I was a little kid, watching my mom, who was a single parent, take on the boys club and run for city council during the city's fiscal crisis. And then watching my cousin Bella Abzug, the former congresswoman and feminist icon, run for mayor of this city, I fell in love with the notion that public office could make a difference in people's lives. And I've been very fortunate to do exactly what I wanted to do, to go to Albany and to be a reformer, to make a difference for tenants, fighting landlords in Albany. I remember as borough president, understanding that communities should decide big projects, and we needed to build out a plan for communities and healthy neighborhoods. I was able to do that because I was elected to office. And as controller, I wouldn't be able to do the kind of real change when we talk about fossil fuel divestment and greening the city economy if I wasn't elected office. So for me, elective office was a vehicle for change. And I saw that firsthand when my mom died of COVID. And the doctors in that Bronx hospital said, you can make a difference. You can change the trajectory of healthcare in this city if you're elected mayor. And right now, I think experience, progressive experience matters. This is not a time for on-the-job training. We need to have a mayor who knows where the money is, where the bodies are buried. And I've taken on this administration when it's gone in the wrong direction, and no one has stood up taller for the people in our boroughs than I have over the last 8 years. So I know that there's many different ways to come to public service. This is the way I chose to do it. I'm proud of my record. It's unmatched by anybody running for mayor, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you. And so I just want to double check before we move forward to see if Mr. Adams has joined us. If not, we're going to go on with the program.
I believe that he will be in a later panel. We are working that out right now. I wanted to see if I see that Lori Sutton is here right now. I don't know if she's able to jump in or if she's even here?
I'm going to keep the other groups the same because we've curated
Okay.
a program
Okay.
around that. So I'm just going to continue. And at this point, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nye.
I'm going to and introduce, it is my privilege to introduce my co-moderator. So I'm going to pass the virtual mic to Gloria Pazmino from New York One.
Thank you so much, Nycha, and thank you to all the groups that are hosting tonight for having me. We're hoping to have a really good and informative discussion. I'll make that reminder to the candidates now to just speak slowly so that the folks who are on trying to translate right now can keep up. So I want to get right to the issue of policing. The two of you have made it pretty clear you have no intention of retaining the current leadership of the NYPD. But I want to ask you exactly, and to please be specific, for what your vision is for the department. Please name 3 priorities that you'd like to see enacted in the first 100 days of your administration. And will you tonight commit to naming a commissioner who is a person of color if you were elected mayor? We are going to start with Ms. Wiley. You have 2 minutes.
So let me start by saying, we're going to put the public back in public safety. And here's what I mean by that. 1, the mayor, myself, with our elected leaders, with our communities, will determine the rules of the road for police officers. Right now, there is way too much gray and not enough clarity about what is and isn't excessive force, for example. And that's one of the reasons why we have police officers not being sufficiently disciplined. We can do that now. The power and authority exists. We just need the political will. But it's also the priorities of policing. So in addition to the rules that make it clear what is okay and not okay, making it clear what the job is and what the job isn't. It is not the job of police officers to be responding to mental health crises that needs a mental health professional. And we need folks who can keep our roads and streets and pedestrians safe. That does not require a badge and a gun. And in our schools, we need student support teams. Right now, we have 5,000 school safety agents. We have 560 school psychologists. We have to flip the script and make sure that we're speaking to the needs of our people. And then third, we will have police accountability because we've made the rules clear and we are going to have a leader who is absolutely on mission for reform and transformation with this vision in mind, but with a vision that recognizes it's problem solving, not creating problems. And that person will be accountable to me. That person will not be someone who came up through the rank and file of the New York City Police Department. And that I will absolutely commit to, and I will restructure the department. So even what we think about as appropriate will be responsive to our people.
Thank you. So I didn't hear yes or no on whether or not you'll name a commissioner who's a person of color. Just only heard that they will not be someone who came up through the ranks. Just want to make sure I have that clear.
I am going to have a government that looks like the city of New York, and that means attention for every single leadership position to folks who look like our citizens, our residents, our members of society. And I can't say that for any one department because I'm going to pick the person who's going to lead on reform, and I'm going to make sure the whole government looks like the city of New York.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. Mr. Stringer, same question to you.
Well, look, the bottom line is Bill de Blasio lost control of the police department. And as a result, there has been no real police reform. What I saw out in the streets this summer only showed how much reform we need to implement in the NYPD. Look, I'm the only candidate with concrete proposals to transform police discipline in this city. I've also laid out a real plan to take away discipline authority from the police commissioner that continues to ignore the recommendations from the CCRB I want to put out a plan, a concrete plan to move that discipline to the CCRB with no interference. Right now, once the police commissioner gets that decision, it's a slap on the wrist and we maintain the status quo. We need a mayor who's going to have the strength and the vision to break the stranglehold on the policing of old and then transform policing. Look, 40% of 911 calls are calls not for crime in progress, but because someone's having a mental health issue or there's a car alarm. And yet we send the police out to do the work that city employees and social workers and guidance counselors and mental health professionals should be doing. We need to reform 911 and we need to create a new way of interacting with our communities. We also have to look at the policing budget and redirect priorities into communities of color, to help kids, to make sure they have summer jobs and youth programs. We need more mentors. We need people to keep kids out of the criminal justice system. That's what I did when I was an assembly member, fighting against prison expansion in the industrial complex and trying to direct more programs into schools and daycare centers. It's going to take a multifaceted approach that the next mayor has to implement on day one. And in terms of the police commissioner, that commissioner is going to report to me, aligned with my values and my views. That may very well be someone African-American and Latino, a woman. It's going to be somebody who I believe will serve this city. And like Maya, I am committed to a diverse city of commissioners and people who reflect the values and the rich history of our city. But policing, we need a reformer as mayor to get the reforms in the police department. And that's the work I've done all my life. I have not been afraid to challenge that authority. And when you look at my record, you see from the day one of the de Blasio administration, whether it was in the Department of Corrections or in policing, we have held him accountable to a record that could have been much better given his progressive mandate.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. I want to take advantage of the fact that we have a little bit of more time because we're missing one candidate. And I want to ask you a follow-up question. First to Mr. Stringer, we saw yet again last night some interaction between the NYPD and what seemed to be some peaceful protests near City Hall. The mayor responded this morning in part by referencing the new disciplinary matrix. But it seems like communication between the top of the department and this administration has broken down and that they are not really listening. So what would you do differently to make sure that the department, as you say, will in fact be listening to you?
Well, it's the way I've managed my office as controller with 780 employees, 7 deputy controllers working on many different issues. It's all about management. It's about waking up in the morning, not going to the gym, but going to the office and making sure that that police department is doing what I say they should do. And we have to make sure that that is put in place. A new generation of police captains and people in the streets who will respond to a progressive mayor who wants to keep the city safe, but also wants to say enough. Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, all the people, George Floyd, whose lives were lost. We're having a national reckoning on police reform. New York City should be leading on these issues by instituting specific reforms. That's why I laid out the CCRB reform plan. We're going to discipline the police in a real way, not in a pretend way. And I hope in the next few weeks as the campaign gets started, that we're gonna talk very specifically about how we do that kind of up and down transformational reform in this city. And look, I agree with Maya. We know that we have to change and do the work that this administration didn't do. And it's time to own up to that.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. The campaign is very much underway as far as I'm concerned. Ms. Wiley, I want to ask you about oversight, specifically civilian oversight, because you did chair the CCRB. So what is wrong in terms of civilian oversight and what isn't working? And why wasn't it changed while you chaired the CCRB?
So here's the thing, and I've sat in City Hall in 2014, 2015, voted with my feet in 2016 because, you know, I agree with Scott, we weren't doing enough. And here's the thing, I got more opportunity to see it from the additional side of CCRB by chairing the CCRB. And what is very clear is absolutely we need a mayor, which is the mayor I will be, who is not afraid of the police unions, because the police unions are actually the political calculus that both sometimes scares police commissioners in addition to mayors. And they do that by threatening an increase in crime and then pointing to political electeds as causing them. And when you are in that seat, in that hot seat, I sat there in the rooms when the heat was coming. It is not like anything you've ever felt. And what it takes is not like being on the outside. It requires being on the inside. And it just takes the guts to say, I don't care, I'm going to make the right decision. And on the CCRB side, the CCRB is chartered and it doesn't have the authority to tell the police department what to do. But a big problem, which is why I said the civilian side, the mayor, in consultation, understanding the needs, the priorities, the experiences of people in our communities, particularly that are over-policed, is the rules of the road. Because right now, what police unions and others have gotten is far too much. And that has to be clarified. And then it is easier to hold accountable. I agree with Scott 100%. The police commissioner cannot be the final arbiter. And let's be clear when we talk about leading the city and what it means to do it from City Hall. The police department is 50,000 employees. 50,000. And the job of City Hall is that plus 54 agencies. And the way you lead it is by ensuring that the rules are clear, the leadership is right, and you are willing to transform the structure so that the accountability is in place. Disciplinary matrix is a good thing and it needs to be there, but it is not enough. And it does require oversight.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. I'm going to turn it back over to Nye for the next question.
And can I ask one last time that candidates put a pause in between sentences during their answers to account for the translation? Thank you. I'll go ahead, Nye.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your passion. I think you guys are benefiting a little bit from these follow-up questions since we have a little bit more time. So I wanted to ask a question about education. The hosts of this forum received numerous questions about the need for improvement and investment in our public education system. Many voters agree that state funding is inadequate and the testing process is flawed. This year, the specialized high schools came under a microscope for their nearly non-existent admission of Black and Latino students at schools such as Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech. A change in state law is definitely required. However, the mayor and local city government can affect change because the mayor of New York still wields considerable authority to overhaul the process at the city's 5 specialized schools. How would you use the power of the mayor's office to change this admissions process? I'm going to start with Scott.
Look, we can no longer tolerate segregated high schools. And the test, the Shazat, continues to create a segregated high school system, meaning basically no Black and brown kids get in. And we cannot continue to sweep that under the rug. And we need to work with our immigrant parents and those parents who have sacrificed a lot so their kids can take this test because they believe in the aspirational hope of what a good education can provide. But when I'm mayor, I'm going to go to Albany, use my skills as a former legislator to, at the very least, move the Shazat and replace it with the 7th grade test, which would allow for more children to get into Stuyvesant, more Black and brown kids to get into Stuyvesant and Bronx Science and the other schools. I'm also going to make sure that we begin a fair process on how we deal with screens. I don't think we should have geographic middle school screens. I think it's time to get the kind of public education that speaks to diversity. And look, I have skin in this game. I have 2 children. They're in the GNT program. And as a parent, I say to myself, I want to give them every opportunity. I didn't understand why I had to have my 4-year-old take a test for his knowledge. I think that's ridiculous, and that's going to change in a Stringer administration. But as a parent, we all want to do what's best for our little kids. You know, I think I'm one of the few mayoral candidates that actually have kids in a public school system. I think there's another candidate. But I also, as mayor, have to think about all the kids. And the truth is, my wife and I, in this remote learning, in this pandemic, we have great privilege. We can get our kids computers, we can get them remote learning. But for hundreds of thousands of kids in the city, they don't have remote learning devices. They don't have internet access. The kids that were behind are falling farther behind. And we need a mayor with an education vision that's going to speak to how we bring those kids back and how we level the playing field. And it starts with having a real conversation with New Yorkers about equity, about integration, about making sure that every child has a chance to make it in this city. And that is the most crucial conversation we have, because as I always say to people when they say, what motivates you to be mayor? I always say, it's the kids, it's my kids. I can't leave them any money. I'm a longtime government employee. I got no money. They're not getting anything from me, but you know what they're gonna get? They're gonna get the best city in the world. And I'm gonna do that for all of your kids, the grandkids, but most importantly for the kids who are languishing without resources to get educated. This has gotta stop. And I'm gonna tell people on day one, this is how we get there. And I'm gonna go to Albany and repeal Heck Calandra. And that's the right thing to do for this city.
Thank you so much. Maya?
So I went to a Black segregated public school. I know what it's like to be in one. I know what it is like to be at the top of your class in second grade and be 2 years behind grade level and watch your best friend struggling just to learn to read, probably because she has a learning difference, except there are no resources or supports to even catch it. And I am a parent whose kids have cumulatively 15 years in the public system. I went to the elementary school system. I went to the neighborhood, school with my kids. We went through the middle school process and the high school process and chose an open admission high school after going through that experience. And let me tell you right now, having chaired the School Diversity Advisory Group, which came out with 2 reports, both with goals and vision, and some explicit recommendations that included no more discriminatory admissions processes, period. And I stand by those. We have right now the opportunity to make admissions systems that are not discriminatory right now without going to Albany. And I would do that. And secondly, literally taking the thing that we have right now in the context of COVID, which is all of our kids behind because online learning did not work for any of our kids. And for far too many students of color, either because there was no device or because the online learning simply wasn't good enough because we didn't invest in teachers to be able to deliver it. And the research shows that students of color do not learn as well in online learning. That we knew before COVID. But COVID has also created a vacancy opportunity. And one of the things I would do, in addition to sticking to those principles, excellent schools for every single kid, and every single kid invested in to not just be a learner, but seen as a gifted learner. That what we can do now is innovate, because we are not at the leading edge as a city, either on getting good class sizes or are being really innovative in making education high quality. So one of the things we saw as a school diversity advisory group were innovations that we were not taking to scale in the city, that we could, that will actually help all our kids, as well as give us opportunities to integrate our schools. The vacancy rates give us that too, because we should start doing that now. If I were mayor right now, you would already start to see some different learning opportunities, but absolutely integrated, and absolutely fighting with Albany on our money, on getting the money that's owed our system.
Thank you so much. That's time. I just want to ask 2 quick follow-up questions before we move on to the next group. And I'm going to ask that you guys kind of think about this in a 30-second kind of quick response so that we have time to kind of hear just a taste, and then you'll be able to plug your website so that we can follow up for more information. So really quickly, this is a think about this carefully. This is going to be a tricky one. Are you in favor of mayoral control of our schools? Yes or no? Maya?
Yes, with better parent engagement.
Great. Scott?
Yes, with better parent engagement.
Next question. Are you pro or anti charter schools? Scott?
Look, I think that we've spent too much time talking about the charter school versus public school. People know that I believe the future in education runs through the public school system. I don't want to diminish kids who are getting an education in charter schools. You know, I was the one who defeated Eva Moskowitz for borough president, so I know that what that fight was about. But I do believe that we have to invest in the 1.1 million school children, and we have a lot to do in public schools where we don't have those resources that charter school boards give those the kids who are in those schools.
Thank you, Maya.
I'm pro public school. I'm pro quality education. You know, I think we have to come together as a city to innovate. I think there are things we can learn from charter schools that we should. I think we have to invest in the schools, and as mayor, in the schools that the Department of Education is running, and that means really understanding where and how we innovate, where and how we can learn innovations, but fundamentally deliver for those 1.1 million kids, because right now we are not, and we must.
Thank you. So this is going to be our final question for this round, but it is a two-parter. And so I kind of want to start with part one and then go to part two. New York City public housing is beyond a state of crisis and has been for decades. From the continued lead scandals to mold and rodent infestations, broken boilers, and vendor as well as employee fraud. Each of you in some capacity has had the power to change this and improve the quality of life for millions of working class families and seniors living on the edge of poverty. What is the primary impediment, and what is the one policy that you would immediately implement as mayor to finally address this injustice? You each have 2 minutes. I'm going to start with Mr. Stringer, who's been in office. What would you say is the primary impediment, and what would you do immediately as mayor to cure this injustice?
Look, when public housing was built, the first public housing in 1938 by Mayor LaGuardia, it was aspirational housing. Once you got a Nycha apartment, the sky was the limit. And when I was growing up in Washington Heights as a kid, you know, there was no difference between a Nycha development and the open space and the building I lived in a few blocks away. It was all interchangeable. And over time, because of federal, state, and city divestment, we have literally put Nycha at a place where it's never truly been, which is literally on the verge of collapse. And while I do think a Biden presidency can change that with massive capital investment, New York City's mayor has a real opportunity to change people's lives in Nycha. And this is the work I've been doing all my life. As controller, I exposed the lead paint crisis. I exposed the lack of repairs when de Blasio said, oh, all the repairs had been made in his first 100 days in office. I have visited most of the Nycha developments in this city, not just at election time, but through our audits and investigations. I've seen what it's like to stand with the tenants of Ingersoll houses while they're watching people walk across the street near the luxury development across the street. You see, we've built so much affordable housing, we lost sight of the fact that we let this housing go. So what I would do as mayor is, with all the monitors and federal decrees, the bottom line is I'm managing this. We're moving Nycha operations into City Hall. We're gonna go building by building and look at every way we have to repair. I'm talking stairways, lights, I'm talking lead paint, broken sinks, lack of hot water. I did the audits that showed just how dangerous the lack of boilers were and gave the mayor a blueprint. I am so excited to be mayor to reform Nycha because I know it like nobody else. I've done more audits there than all the controllers combined, but it speaks to an overall housing strategy. If we don't fix Nycha, if we don't expand low-income housing, we're gonna have 100,000 people in homeless shelters. This administration went from spending $1.6 billion managing the homeless crisis to going to spend $3.2 billion to manage the same crisis. There was no imagination, there was no vision. So what I ask people to do tonight is look at my housing plan. It's not just Nycha, it's the entire housing stock. And when it comes to Nycha, you put me in a position to actually change the trajectory of people's lives, whether it's Dyckman houses, Ingersoll, Amsterdam houses, the people I've gotten to know on the road to fighting every day for people to have hot heat and hot water. I don't want to ever have to go to East Harlem again to be called by a tenant and said, you've got to come here, and walk into the hallway and see somebody who just got out of the hospital because they had a heart attack, and everyone in the hallway shivering in their pajamas because there was no heat. And you know why that heat got turned on? The heat got turned on because the city controller went to the building. That's not the way you run Nycha. That is not the way we do this.
Thank you. Ms. Wiley, the same question to you. What do you think is the greatest impediment, and what immediate policy would you deploy?
So this is not theoretical for me. My godson lives in public housing in the Bronx, and there have been periods in his life he's lived with me as a result. And my daughters have friends in public housing on the Upper East Side and in Sheepshead Bay. And she spent the night there with them. So here's what I would say. You know, one of the great things about being in City Hall when I was there was that when the mayor said to me, Maya, universal broadband, that's yours. And I thought, great. I have no idea how to do that. But I knew we had to start somewhere and show government, show the city how we could do something we've never done before. And I chose public housing to do it in because I understood who are the residents in this city always left out of the investment and where we have much more need. And that's why we focused on getting every single Queensbridge in Queens, yes, as the largest public housing development in North America, not just in New York, because it was a proof point. And I had a plan that I had gotten the money for, found the revenue, got 4 separate agencies working together to get done something never done before in the city's history. And when I left thinking it would happen. And it didn't. And it didn't because I left. So here's what I know about Nycha. It does require focus and attention. We have a new administration in DC. It owes us, meaning it owes our public housing residents. I will definitely work with the federal government, with the new administration. Marcia Fudge, who heads HUD, is someone I have known, and work to get more federal dollars. We also have to work with the state, of course, and always on our budget. But I have already proposed New Deal for New York, which is $10 billion in capital construction spend to focus on hard-hit communities to bring our economy back, create 100,000 new jobs, and do it in a way that solves community problems. In addition, and that is $2 billion of that will also be for Nycha renovation and rehabilitation, because that's the kind of thinking that is transformational and that is doing something the city's never done before. And I'll add one last thing. When I asked public housing residents, and I was just today before being on this forum up in the Bronx at Andrew Jackson and Morrisania and Melrose houses. And tenants say the same thing when you ask, what's the number one thing you want from government? And they say, basically, power, voice. So we will immediately transform the relationship with tenants so that there's a governance structure and transparency and accountability with data to residents, so that they're also able to have a say in the priorities and what projects to start with and what they want done first, and a say in how it gets done.
Thank you. And so quick follow-up, and this is a 30-second, just as a follow-up to that, because you were talking about tenants having a voice. Do you support the RAD plan for Nycha, Mr. Stringer? Yes or no? And you can have a small comment to that.
I have issues with RAD as it leads to privatization. Obviously, I'm open to anything that makes it better for Nycha residents, but I think we can do better than RAD. I think there are already different ideas to move away from that and move into a place where tenants and government have a real opportunity, especially with state and federal funding. So my answer would be, I don't think RAD is the solution, but I I do think we have to come up with our own way of solving the repair problem.
Thank you. Same question to you, Ms. Wiley. Do you support the RAD plan for Nycha? This is more of a yes or no. You can answer with a small explanation.
So public housing has to stay public. There's a debate about RAD and its implementation, and I'm very conscious of that, and not overwhelmed by what I'm seeing and hearing about RAD. But I put public housing residents first, and there's at least one development that's asked for it. And others that have fought it. And so I would have a discussion with residents about what works for them. And that's part of the governance structure. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all.
Understood.
We have to do what works.
Time. Last question. We're going to squeeze this one question in, and I want you guys to try to be as brief as possible. But this is really important. And this will be the last question of this section. Real estate, construction, and development are always hot topics in New York during any election cycle. But after more than a year of debate, the developers of a major commercial project at Industry City pulled the plug on the project, eliminating what could have been 20,000 jobs for local residents. The developers were quoted as stating that there was a lack of political leadership to get the project approved. And many also commented that the city's leadership had failed to work with the local community to secure a good deal that would have included investing in the neighborhood areas. How would you work with developers, big and small? And more importantly, how would you work with the community to ensure that the community input is robust, that community benefits are actually delivered, like local hiring and neighborhood investments? And also, how will you work through to make sure that potential projects for our city actually are realized? And I want to make sure that we're only going to stay to 1 minute responses. I am going to be hard on the bell. I hope you're hearing it. So when you hear the bell, that means you have 15 seconds to wrap up. You only have 1 minute to respond. What would you do to make sure there's more community input and to make sure that we can realize new investment in our city? I'm going to start with Scott.
Look, you started out with absolutely the right question when you said, and community. So what I would do is put community first. We've got to go back to something we used to do in this town, and I used to do it as borough president. It's called community-based planning. It's giving people a say in what gets built and how it gets built in neighborhoods. The reason I've opposed these de Blasio rezonings as it relates to housing was because these rezonings were in partnership with wealthy real estate developers. And what would happen is the developers would go into mostly communities of color, because there was very few rezonings in white communities. They would build 30-story buildings with the promise that they would build 30% affordable housing. The problem is that when you drill down, and I did this as controller, that housing was unaffordable to the people in the communities. So long-time residents were forced to leave, and gentrification came into all of our neighborhoods. This happened time and time again. And then when it looked at Industry City and Amazon, these deals were done in secret with no opportunity for the community. In my mayoralty, this changes on day one. We create a community-based planning process. The same process I did by empowering community boards and giving people a say. We have to build real affordable housing.
Thank you so much.
Let's stop rezoning for luxury developers and start rezoning for the people and holding the city-owned land that we have, 566 properties in Brooklyn, give that land back to the people, give not-for-profits the opportunity to build housing, and that's how you create an integrated city of affordable housing. Sorry for the overrun, but I can't help myself.
Turn it over to Maya. It's your last one, so you got to get it all in.
Sorry.
These are the last questions. Maya, the same question to you. What would you do to make sure that we are able to take care of our community, have their input, but yet build robustly in our city?
One of the first traumas I had as a young kid was when my best friend Charlene disappeared one day because her mother, who was a cashier at the grocery store down the block, couldn't pay the rent when it got increased. And that was because a subway was coming to the neighborhood. And that meant my community got displaced. So it starts with being involved from day one, from the beginning, partnering with community, bringing folks to the table and not leaving it but being at the table, pulling folks together with clear principles, with clear impacts and outcomes for the community. That means development without displacement. That means creating communities that livable for the people who live there. That means making sure that people benefit economically from the development. And so all of those things become the starting point for the discussion. Absolutely agree with Scott. We need a comprehensive and long-term planning process at the same time, so communities can map out their futures at the same time that we have this kind of partnering process on particular developments as they're going along. They must be transparent, they must be bold, and I would be involved from the beginning to the end.
Thank you so much for that. So lightning round, we're gonna have a little fun for a moment. We've got 3 quick questions before we close out this first group. So we're going to start with Comptroller Stringer. What is your favorite Brooklyn small business that you support? Whether it's restaurant, store, what's your favorite Brooklyn small business?
The one I love the most is the Italian restaurant that we go to. That name escapes me right now, but I love it. It's my favorite restaurant. Noodle pudding.
Noodle pudding. Okay, we got a shout out to Noodle Pudding. Maya Wiley, what is your favorite Brooklyn small business?
Phew, hard to have one, but awesome Brooklyn, because it's awesome on Flatbush Avenue, run by a neighbor who lives in the community, open the business, and it is a fabulous gift shop, and you can buy all kinds of amazing things there. Anything you need to gift for someone else.
Awesome. We're going to put you on the spot. Comptroller Stringer, are you a Knicks fan or a Nets fan?
Knicks fan, 1970s, Willis Reed, Frazier. I get the Nets because I'm running for mayor, but I'm Knicks, can't help it.
Maya Wiley?
Knicks have been breaking my heart for years, been a Knicks fan, but I will say my friend Rex Chapman's son is with the Nets, and so I might have to leave.
Okay, we've got you on the record for that.
Uh-oh.
We got you on the record for that. Next quick question, rapid fire here. Scott Stringer, when's the last time you were on the subway?
I took my child to his first day of school with my wife a couple of weeks ago and last week as well.
Awesome. Maya Wiley, last time you were on the subway?
Yesterday, B train.
And since we were talking about housing, I know, Maya, you may have answered this, but I was going to ask, what was the last Nycha housing complex you visited? I think you mentioned you were in some today.
Andrew Jackson houses today, along with Morrisania and Melrose.
And Scott Stringer?
I'm in Nycha almost every other day, but I was in El Barrio a few weeks ago with Congressman Espiat, who's endorsed my candidacy.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I'm going to allow you 2 seconds each just to plug your website. And if there's an email so people can see your policies and stay in touch. Maya Wiley, what is your website? And an email if you want to share it.
So look, we have people's assemblies to have these kinds of conversations where we listen and learn and the people lead. Go to MayaWileyForMayor.com. I hope you will sign up. You don't have to endorse me to do it, to participate in directing the solutions for this city, and info@MayaWileyForMayor.com.
Great. Thank you so much. Scott Stringer?
Please join the grassroots campaign. Join Bobby Carroll and Diana Richardson and the progressive community that is supporting my candidacy. Go to StringerForMayor.com. We just had an amazing volunteer kickoff tonight. More to come. Thank you all, Brooklyn, for listening. I think Maya and I had a great time answering all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. That concludes the opening session of this evening's mayoral forum. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to kick it over to Gloria Pazmino.
Before Gloria gets on, I want to make a clarification and an announcement. I know some people have been following the Facebook comments and some comments on Twitter. I want to make it clear that looking at it, this was actually our mistake, the mistake of the organizers in Mr. Borough President Adams' schedule. He was under the impression that he was in a different time, in a different group. He will be in the third group, the one after this. So I just want to make it clear to any out there who are watching, who are concerned, who are tweeting or commenting about it, that this we are taking the responsibility for this. And, you know, Borough President Adams is on schedule as he understood the schedule. So I will now pass it off to Gloria for our second group.
Thanks so much, Rich, and thank you for making that announcement. We are going to get started with our second group. It includes Andrew Yang, Zachary Iscol, Ray McGuire, and Diane Morales, and I believe they are all here. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves, and then we will move on to questions. Mr. Yang, we're going to start with you. You have 1 minute to do a brief introduction, and then we will move on. Mr. Yang.
I'm sorry to interrupt right before Mr. Yang, but I will give a clarification to the candidates who are here now who may not have been listening before. We are having simultaneous translation. That means that you need to speak more slowly than usual. If you're reading, you are probably speaking too fast. And please try and put spaces in between your sentences and responses. And I will now turn it off to Mr. Yang.
Well, thank you. Hello, Gloria, and hello, Brooklyn. It's tremendous to be here with you all. My campaign is built around trying to get the city back on its feet. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver, and you don't have to look far to see the problems right now. I'm kind of a numbers guy. So the first number is 25, maybe 26,000 of our friends and neighbors have passed, 700,000 missing jobs, over 10,000 small businesses closing, including so many in Brooklyn that have been struggling for months to try and make it through the pandemic. Subway traffic is down 2/3. You don't have to look very far. And so the question is, how are we going to get the city back on its feet? How are we going to get our schools safely reopened? How are we going to make it so that people can actually go to work in offices and come into the city? There are 60 million missing tourists who supported 300,000 jobs in Brooklyn and around the city. So that to me has to be the first order of business, is trying to get us back to a point where we're accelerating the recovery. The fact is, we cannot wait for vaccination to somehow resuscitate our city. We have to lead. We have to make it so that folks have confidence that this is still the place to be for so many things under the sun. And for us, this is our home. We have to make it so that our schools are reopened and that people are able to live their lives safely in a way that we're actually excited about. That's a very, very tough process, but I believe I can help speed it up.
Thank you. Mr. Iscol, you're next.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Zach.
First off, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Wish I could actually be in Brooklyn with you all, but it's great to be here tonight. So, you know, I'm new to politics, but I'm not new to public service. I've been in public service now for 2 decades, and my family's always served this city. My grandfather worked for the Department of Sanitation. My mom, she was one of the only white teachers to cross the line during the 1968 teacher strike. And my service started in the Marines. I was in the infantry and special operations. I led troops through some of the heaviest combat of the Iraq War. I spent the last decade helping people get jobs in healthcare. I've built a number of multi-million-dollar businesses, one of which has helped tens of thousands of people transition into new careers. And I've also built an organization called the Headstrong Project. So when I came home from war, I struggled with post-traumatic stress, with sleepless nights, with survivor's guilt. I was fortunate. I was able to get the help that I needed, but many of the Marines I served with were not. And I struggled to get them into the VA to navigate that bureaucracy. And so we built an organization called the Headstrong Project. It's now one of the leading and largest providers of mental health care in the United States. We're taking care of 800 to 1,000 veterans every single week. And the work there, I am deeply proud of. And most recently, on March 27th of this year, I went to Javits Medical Center as a volunteer at the height of COVID. I walked into an environment that was deeply familiar to me, 28 federal, state, and city agencies, some of the best people I've worked with in my career, but those agencies weren't working together. And I led the turnaround after I got asked to step in as the deputy director. I led the turnaround of Javits Medical Center into one of the only successful COVID field hospitals in the country. And that's one of the reasons I'm running, is because I will also turn around this great city of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire, we're going to go to you next for a 1 minute introduction.
Hi, this is Ray McGuire, and I'm running for mayor because I have what it takes to lead our city out of this economic crisis, which is exacerbated by the pandemic and a host of other factors that have taken our city in the wrong direction. In fact, in reverse. My life is that I grew up from the bottom. Upbringing was my mother raised me and my two brothers. She was a social worker. I didn't know my dad. At any one point in time, we had half a dozen foster children in our home. And because of her sacrifices, I was able to get a great education. I came to New York with three things. I had a good education, I had a lot of debt, and I had no money. It allowed me to come to New York and compete in one of the most competitive businesses with people who didn't look like me, and I've succeeded. It's not who I am, it's what I've done. I've created large and small businesses. I've supported education and cultural institutions and library boards. I've supported healthcare and essential workers. My plan, my vision for the city is jobs, no city, economic equality, economic justice. Number one, safety, security, and quality of life. Number two, and number three is education. And I came here when I talked to my 94-year-old mother and told her I'd quit my job. She said, boy, you have lost your mind. And then we talked about why I was doing this. I said, Mama, at this point in time, the city needs a leader. They need somebody who's got the lived experiences, which is my foundation. They need somebody who's got the business experience, leading and managing large and small businesses and investing in those businesses. And they need somebody who can bring this city together. I'm unbossed, like Shirley Chisholm. I haven't been timed out. I'm not looking for promotion. I'm looking for what's best for this great city, and especially those people, those kids who look like me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. And last but certainly not least, we'll go to Ms. Morales for her 1-minute introduction, and then we'll get started with our questions.
Yep, sorry about that. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you all for having me here tonight. Good evening. My name is Diane Morales, and I've had over 25 years of experience meeting the needs of New Yorkers when our systems have failed. I'm also from right here in Brooklyn. I taught here, I raised my family here, and I have organized here. Through all of this, I have experienced failed systems, but I've also experienced the hope of our communities. And it is that combination that led me to enter this race. I didn't leave the city during the pandemic, and that's not a dig, but it's a center, it's my center, which is why I instead got involved in organizing with Bed-Stuy Strong to help support my community. I've seen newly unemployed artists reinvent their skills to make ends meet. I've seen wage earners pick up food from mutual aid centers. And as Wall Street and the stock market got stronger, our already weak systems created an even deeper inequity within our schools, our health facilities, and our neighborhoods. The problem is not money. Our city has the resources. The problem is our priorities, how administration after administration, out of touch with our communities, continue to fail to address the root causes of the barriers to a dignified life. The answer cannot be just to throw money at the fire or build around it. We need a new paradigm that will prioritize communities most in need, stabilize the livelihoods of our neighbors, and radicalize our approach to addressing the needs of the majority of New Yorkers. I look forward to sharing my vision for the city, one that is inspired by the people, with the people, and for the people. I'm not here to get us back to the status quo. I'm running for mayor to create an equitable city that we have yet to experience, but that we all deserve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna just make the reminder and give the translators a chance to catch up. Just remember to, I know it's hard, but there are folks who are trying to listen to you who are not totally fluent and wanna get an idea of what you guys are talking about. So give them a chance to catch up with the translation. I wanna get right to our first question. And I wanna kind of start with the obvious, which is that none of you have ever held public office. Some of you are first-time political candidates, and the city is very much in the middle of an unprecedented health crisis. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the city has lost $10.5 billion in tax revenue, Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers are out of a job, and a range of industries are still reeling from the economic impact. What experience can you point to? And I want you to please be specific, to reassure New Yorkers that you have what it takes to manage the city's multi-billion-dollar budget, its municipal workforce, and that you will continue to provide them with the essential services they have been relying on through the duration of this crisis. We're going to start.
Sorry, is that to me?
Give me 2 seconds. You each have 2 minutes to respond, and we are going to get started with Ms. Morales, and I'll call on you when it's your turn.
Great, thank you. So there's two key things that I think qualify for me for this job. One is I am a first-generation Black Latina born and raised in this city and have been through it all. I've been a single mother who had 2 children in the public school system, both of whom had learning challenges, both of whom have struggled with police brutality and violence. And my daughter has also been a survivor of mental health challenges. So I have personal lived experiences that puts me in shared community with the majority of New Yorkers. I know what the challenges are. I know what it takes to overcome that. From an executive perspective, I have been the CEO of nonprofit organizations for over 25 years, including human service agencies most specifically. If anybody knows how to actually balance a budget where your reimbursement rates are 80 cents to the dollar, while also being responsible for providing critical life-saving services to people, from housing to education to career opportunities to connections to benefits, that was me. I have done that. I have led teams of hundreds of people and managed budgets of tens of millions of dollars and been able to actually get everybody working on the same page towards a shared vision, understanding the role and the value that they bring to the execution of a mission that is focused on directly impacting and improving people's lives, not managing budgets that had to do with other people's money, managing budgets that had a direct impact on the lives of people and people's ability to survive in New York City. That's what makes me qualify, because I've done that and I have done that well.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. We're going to go to Mr. McGuire next. The question is again about the specific experience that qualifies you to be mayor of the city at this time.
Thank you. This is a experience that is needed. I have, since the depth of the financial crisis, been the longest standing person to manage a business. Budgets. I've managed over 50 budgets. I know what it's like to manage from the depth of the financial crisis, where you go out and lead and build a team that can manage through the crisis. So I've managed budgets. I manage large budgets. I have invested in not-for-profits. I've helped lead not-for-profits. From sitting on the board of Presbyterian Hospital, where I invested in and financed the nurses station at 168th Street, where I have worked on a foundation to sponsor nurses in the New York City hospital operating system. I've invested in each of these communities. When it came to the height of the COVID crisis, I've managed to get PPE into Brooklyn community hospitals. I was able to get food into Harlem Community Hospital, into the Harlem Hospital. I have lived and managed experience where I have managed large global budgets and led large teams, investing in the neighborhood. And I was the longest standing head of banking in the history of Wall Street, and the only one who looked like me. I have invested in educational institutions. I've invested in cultural institutions. If there's anyone who knows how to manage this budget, it is me. I have the lived experience. I have the management and leadership experience of large budgets, often larger than state budgets. These are not small budgets that I've managed. This is not a small group of people that I've managed. I've managed businesses globally. And so if there's anybody who today has the skill set that's necessary to bring the city together with lived experiences, with leadership and management experiences, with the ability to bring coalitions from the streets to the suites together, that is me. And my plan is to lead the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this city. And I have a track record that demonstrates that I have and can do it.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Mr. Isco, we'll go to you next.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on something before I answer the question. Diane Morales mentioned about reimbursements rates at 80 cents on the dollar. The work that organizations like Phipps Neighborhood, other nonprofits are doing around the city right now are critical. And the city right now is balancing its budget by cutting reimbursements to many of those organizations. And that's unconscionable. These are organizations, we are starving organizations that feed our fellow New Yorkers, literally. And that is indefensible. In terms of me and my background, I've made life and death decisions. I've led through crisis. More importantly, I've led through the aftermath of crisis. And during those experiences, one of the things that has become abundantly clear to me is that the only way you make it through a crisis is together. The first Marine we lost in Iraq, he was killed because in a misguided war, because the greatest military in the world went to war without armor on our Humvees. We had to figure out ways of working with local tribes, insurgent groups to keep the peace. When I came home from that war, and I struggled to get my friends into the care that they needed, we built a nonprofit healthcare provider that is now one of the largest providers of mental health care. Mental health care and mental health is the next pandemic, and we're already in it. I have experience across the private sector, building businesses, in the nonprofit sector, and in government. I've helped lead the turnaround, running 28 federal, state, and city agencies to build a COVID hospital in 5 days. It is a story that has not been told. And so one of the reasons, and I think when we look at sort of what we need to do to bring New York City out of this, it's going to be about bringing all of the resources together in the city. It's going to be about getting agencies within the city government to work together on seemingly intractable problems, getting the city to work with the state and the federal government. I've done that. It's going to be about bringing in the nonprofit sector. I have nonprofit experience on the front lines. And it's also going to be about engaging the private sector and businesses, and I've done that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isco. And we'll go to Mr. Yang. What about your experience specifically qualifies you to lead us out of this financial crisis at this time?
Thank you, Gloria. I co-owned and operated a small business right here in New York City that became #1 in the country. It's one reason why I'm so passionate about the small businesses that are struggling right now, because I've been there. No, I understand the struggles they're facing. I started a national nonprofit that created thousands of jobs around the country and got grants from the government. And then I started a national movement around a human-centered economy that helped us get cash relief into people's hands. And it helped me build relationships on Capitol Hill and in the administration that I think are going to be really helpful to New York City. No, like I can actually give folks a call and say, hey, like, let's get that tunnel built. And the reality is that the next mayor is going to have to do 3 things at once at a minimum, really more like 30 things at once. But the 3 big things, we're going to have to make some tough choices. You're looking at a multi-billion-dollar budgetary shortfall, and you're going to have to tighten the belt. The second thing is you're going to have to take the resources that we do have and stretch them and make them work and still deliver vital services. And the third thing, and this is something I'm excited about, is we have to activate new resources that may not fall directly within the city's budget. I'm a parent, like many of the folks on this call today. And so I've been joking with people that the next mayor is going to have to make a lot of stone soup. You know what I mean? Or is it rock soup? Like that children's book where you like take the water, and you guys know what I'm talking about. But we're going to have to activate resources in all different ways, in philanthropy, in the private sector, technology, get folks to the table and say, look, this is going to speed up your business's recovery. If you work with, let's say, the small business owner and the landlord, where you try and have the landlord or the small business owner, that it's better for them to be there than to have no tenant at all. Like, we're going to have to bring people to the table in those situations one by one and do it thousands of times. And that is what I have done as an entrepreneur throughout my career. Gloria?
Gloria, are you there?
I am here. My connection has slowed down, but I'm still here. Thank you, Mr. Yang. I'm so glad you brought up specifics, because we're going to get even more into them in this next round. I'm going to toss it over to Nycha, who is going to ask you the next question.
Good evening, everyone. And before we move forward, I just want to remind everyone, in case you came on later in the program, that bell, when it dings, means you have 15 seconds left. Please use that time wisely to complete whatever your thought or sentence is, to avoid Gloria and I from interrupting you in the middle of your vision. So just want to remind you that we have a lot of candidates. We want to make sure we stay on time. So as we were talking about the economy, many of you have touched on some of the key issues related to the devastation our city has experienced during this pandemic. In your first 100 days, I would love you to talk about one specific policy item that you would implement to address how we build back in this city. Please try to go beyond what's already written on your websites, because we can go there to read that. So kind of give us the meat behind the idea, or the methodology behind the meat, for lack of a better term. So we're going to start with Mr. McGuire. What is the one policy you would implement to help the city's recovery in the first 100 days while you're in office?
Thank you. I would implement the most important policy, which has to do with the economy. And my vision for the economy is go big, go small. Go big, I would create hundreds of thousands of jobs, to invest in basic infrastructure for one, 2, affordable housing, and 3, technology, fundamentals of technology. Number 1 on infrastructure, fractured bridges, sewage mains, water mains. We need to fix that. We also need to focus on what is environmentally sound. Lower Manhattan Resiliency Plan for the 100-year flood that comes every 5 years. I would make sure that we had jobs created for that. Number 2, affordable housing. Historically, we've had 2.2 units of housing built for every new job. Today is 0.5. We have failed in creating affordable housing. I would make certain that the first priority would be affordable housing. And number 3, there are too many of our children who don't have access to broadband. And we need to build the technology infrastructure of the future. That's going big. Going small, I would focus on small businesses. Half of New York is employed by small businesses. I would make certain that we cut the red tape, that we'd have a small business advocate to advocate on behalf of those small businesses, that we give a lifeline to the existing small businesses, and that we put capital into those small businesses, either in the form of grants, low interest loans, or equity capital. I've done this before. I put millions of dollars into the community, either personally or institutionally, to grow small businesses. So it's going big, going small, which would be my first 100-day priority. And that's included in the most inclusive economic comeback that this city has ever experienced.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to go to Mr. Yang.
So the question for all of us right now is, what does the recovery curve look like? The vaccination rollout has not been great. A lot of folks are frustrated by that. And then the question is, okay, at what point do the companies reopen, the businesses reopen, does foot traffic resume, do tourists come back? And the fact is that the vaccination adoption curve is not going to do the trick for us. So my priority early on would be to restore public confidence in making New York the place to be, to visit, to work, to play. The fact is, New York City's value proposition is based on bringing people together. It's based on proximity. And right now, that value proposition is working against us. So the way you make it work for us again is you create a vaccination passport on our phones. I would show you my phone, but I'm obviously talking on my phone. And it only has one data point, which is I've been vaccinated. And then you can flash it on your way to the Garden or Barclays or the restaurant or the bar. And then everyone in there is confident that you're all vaccinated. You can take your mask off, you can eat, you can relax. This would actually make New York City the fastest post-COVID comeback city. It would make us a catalyst for people actually getting vaccinated. It would restore confidence for some of those 60 million tourists who right now are not visiting us. That supported over 300,000 jobs. This recovery is going to stink unless we have the right leadership. Like, let's just face facts. Like, it's not like all of a sudden we're going to go from 100 to 0 back to 100. Like, we're going to go from 100 to 0 to some number. And you can like throw your own number in there, what that is, 40, 50, 60. So you need to actually juice it, speed it up, pour fuel on it or accelerant on it. And to me, making New York City the leader is the best way to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Morales.
Thanks, Nye. So let's get serious. Recovery in this city is not possible for as long as our low-income Black and brown folks are dying. So the first thing we need to do is to make it possible for people to stay healthy. And we do that by paying them to stay home, giving them the resources that they need in order to stay home and be safe. That is the first thing we have to do. And the way we do that actually is by reprioritizing our budget. So we look at our budget and we control the things that we can control right now. And we start by divesting from the NYPD and investing in our communities so that people can stay home and be safe. And we provide housing to everyone that needs it, because we can't separate public safety from public health if people don't have housing. And then we look at how we can bring back our economy. And the way we do that is by prioritizing our small and mid-sized businesses. Instead of continuing to focus on the idea that big corporations and businesses are in fact the salvation for our economy, we have to remember that small and mid-sized businesses are actually responsible for employing close to 50% of New Yorkers. And so we have to focus and invest in them first and get that 50% of our population back to work once we have controlled for COVID by keeping people at home, keeping them safe, and giving them a place to live. That's what I think we need to do in order to recover.
Thank you. Mr. Iskul?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll talk about two things really quickly. So number one is we know that the issues facing the city are deeply interconnected. And yet we have a city government that if my grandfather walked into the city that he worked for in the 1950s, he would find that it's still bureaucratic and siloed in the same way it was over 70 years ago. And so when we look at these problems, whether you're talking about homelessness, if you're talking about homelessness, you also have to think about, it's not just about mental health. It's not just about affordability. It's also about education. It's about jobs. It's about economic growth. If you're talking about small businesses, it's about reducing regulation. It's about increasing foot traffic. It's about investing in art and culture. If you're talking about closing the education gap, it's not just about smaller class sizes. It's not just about getting schools open. It's also about mental health. It's also about addressing food insecurity. It's also about addressing technology insecurity and housing insecurity. And so we need to break apart these siloed bureaucratic government, city government. We need to create task forces that are focused on solving big problems, not just across city agencies, but also across the private sector and the nonprofit community, and getting them to work together on these seemingly big problems. So creating those task forces focused on those problems would be one of the things I focus on in those first 100 days. The other thing is our budget. We take an incremental approach to budgeting. So the way that the city works is it looks at what are projected revenues. And if it's more than what we spent last year, it finds things to spend money on. If it's less, it finds things to cut. Instead, we need to do a quadrennial budget review. Once every 4 years, we will build a zero-based budget off of looking at what the city should be doing, what are the outcomes we're delivering at, what are the services we need to be providing. And that will identify a lot of savings, a lot of waste. But more importantly, those savings can be invested in things that create a more equitable New York. Things like making transportation, public transportation affordable, possibly even free, making our city college system free and affordable at the same time. Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge that all of you stayed on time for that round. So snaps, and kudos, because I know it's a long night for many of you who've been out campaigning all day. And so I appreciate that. We're just going to mix it up a little bit. So I don't know if they warned you, but we do have a rapid fire moment. So before we get to a couple more serious questions, we're going to get to know you guys a little bit more. And so our audience can get to know you a little bit more with some quick rapid fire questions. These are either yes or no short phrases. And we're going to start with the most important of all. The Brooklyn Dodgers left Brooklyn a long time ago. So I want to know if you are a Mets or a Yankees fan. I'm going to start with Mr. Yang.
Let's go Mets. I became a fan back in the Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez era. And kudos to them for canning the GM today. You can't have that GM. I mean, talk about a terrible way to kick off the new regime.
Thank you so much. Mr. McGuire.
Yankees. Yankees.
Yankees.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Miss Morales.
Born and raised in Bed-Stuy, Mets all the way.
Awesome. And Mr. Iskul?
My dad's stepfather almost played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, but I'm a Yankees fan.
Thank you so much. Next question. Who is your favorite New Yorker, dead or alive? I'm going to start with Mr. Yang.
The first person that popped into mind for me was a Nick, which is funny.
That's an acceptable answer.
Yeah, so I grew up on, and he's not even from New York. I think he's from the Midwest. But the first person that just jumped into my mind was John Starks, the dunk over Jordan. And I know that's a terrible answer because he's not even from New York. I think he's from Oklahoma. But once a Nick, always a Nick. So I'll just go that
That'll
direction.
work for us. He's always in my neighborhood, so he counts as a New Yorker for me. Miss Morales, favorite New Yorker, dead or alive?
Shirley Chisholm.
Ooh, thank you so much. Mr. Iskel?
My grandma Sylvia. She grew up in Hell's Kitchen during the Great Depression. She always had a smile on her face, and I miss her constantly every single day.
So now we're going to really put you on the hot seat and ask you to
We didn't hear from McGuire.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. McGuire, favorite New Yorker, dead or alive?
Franklin A. Thomas. Franklin A. Thomas started the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation, was one of the first leaders of the Ford Foundation. Franklin A. Thomas negotiated the peace between de Klerk, Botha, and Mandela in South Africa. Franklin A. Thomas. If you don't know, now you know.
Thank you for the history lesson. I love it. So we're going to follow up on that history lesson and ask you a question that's going to put you on the hot seat just a little bit further with our audience. What is your favorite Brooklyn small business and extra credit if it is owned by a minority, a woman, or an immigrant? So Mr. McGuire, for the history lesson, what's your favorite go-to spot in Brooklyn?
Don't even think about it. Sweet Brooklyn, Nostrand Avenue. Check the ownership.
Thank you. Ms. Morales.
The Spot at City Point, Black owned.
Thank you. Mr. Iskel?
Wild, pizza restaurant owned by immigrant. She's from Canada, but she's half Japanese, half Indian, and remarkable woman and one of my closest friends.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Yang?
You know, I was just visiting at a salon called Lola's, and listening to her story was really inspiring. She's like working twice as hard for half the money. So small businesses like that. But as a consumer, Grimaldi's Pizza, like to me, it's the best in the city.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm going to kick it over to my co-moderator, Gloria, for your next tough question.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a very tough question also from our lightning round, because I do want to ask you candidates what you are reading right now. Mr. Yang, what are you reading right now?
But some people have sent me some books on, so I'm a bit of a nerd. Like I'm reading books about artificial intelligence. I think there's some really interesting applications. I'm reading a manuscript that hasn't come out yet by a guy named Kai-Fu Lee. So we share the same publisher. So just trying to bone up on what's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Iskel. I see you glancing over there at your bookshelf. No cheating. You have to be actually reading the book right now.
I'm reading a couple books, Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights and Cast.
Thank you. And Ms. Morales, what are you reading right now?
I am reading my friend Frederick Joseph's book, The Black Friend, on being a better white person.
Thank you. And Mr. McGuire, are you reading it?
You know what I'm reading again? I got two of them. I got David Levering-Lewing's W.E.B. Du Bois, and most importantly, I have Inspiration, which I'm rereading, which is my wife's second or third book, Profiles of Black Women in Courage, Inspiration.
Thank you. We're going to get to one more question, and this one is about cars and parking. We got a lot of submissions from the members of groups who are hosting this event tonight, so we want to make sure we cover it. This could be a little bit controversial depending on where you land, so I'm going to give you an example. Our sister city, Paris, has been turned into what some cycling enthusiasts describe as a cycling mecca. The city is greener, there is less traffic, and the air quality has improved. Are you committed to reshaping the city's streetscape to make it safer for cyclists and pedestrians, even if it means losing parking on some streets? Mr. Iskel, we'll start with you.
I just took a bike ride with Dave Cullen from Streets Blogs. If you haven't, as a mayoral candidate, taken your bike ride with him yet, I encourage you to do it. It was a remarkable experience getting to the city through his eyes. This is also an issue that's deeply personal to me. I've been hit by car doors. My cousin Jimmy in 2010 was hit by a city truck, spent 3 months in a coma. I'm 100% committed to this. I used to put 100, 150 miles a week on my bike in this city. So it's something I care about. And I believe that we can make this a better city. I think this taps into one of the issues I am most passionate about and I care about, which is mental health. Having a city that is vibrant, greening spaces, taking over, getting back streets from cars adds to a more mentally healthy city in addition to a physically healthy city. So yes, I'm 100% committed to this.
Thank you. Ms. Morales, would you be willing to sacrifice parking spots in order to change the city's streetscape?
The short answer to that question is yes. I am fully committed to open streets, safe streets, more bicycle-friendly streets. However, I also think it's really important for us to be mindful in that process of those low-income and middle-class folks who rely on their cars for work and economic reasons. And so I think any program that we roll out to decrease car traffic and increase open green spaces would have to be done with an eye towards not disproportionately impacting people's livelihoods who rely on cars for transportation.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. What would you do about parking spots, and what would you do specifically to increase access to bicycle lanes?
Alors, vous avez dit Paris. Je connais Paris même alors. J'étais là-bas il y a deux fois. Comme ça, what we need is to be mindful of what's taking place, as Ms. Morales says, about parking in neighborhoods where there's limited parking on the ground. When you reference Paris, you should reference underground parking in Paris. There's limited parking that takes place on the streets of Paris until you get into the outer boroughs. I would be in favor of, as has happened in my neighborhood, where we have reduced parking to make certain that we have bike lanes. I have a bike. I take city bikes around the park quite often. So I'm quite favorable for making certain that we reduce the carbon footprint that is caused by cars. I'm quite favorable to making certain that we have bicycles that are readily available. I'm also certain that in order to, when we eliminate the bike lanes, that we need to have some accommodation for those people who simply cannot afford parking other than what we provide as a city.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. I know you ride around on a bike, so tell us about your plan to increase the city's access and New Yorkers' access to bike lanes.
Well, first, let me say, I don't think I'm anywhere near the cyclist that Zach is. Like, I don't think I've ever gone 100 miles in a day. But I'm committed.
It was before kids.
Still, man. And you look the part, Zach. Like, you're like this, ultra fit warrior. It's freaking great.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
No, I mean, we're all thinking it, Zach. We're all thinking
focus. Get to the question.
I'm very, very committed to trying to make us the most bikeable city that we can be. I do think, though, that there are certain areas where you don't necessarily want to swap out parking for bike lanes. You have to check with a community and see what their needs are. It's not a one-size-fits-all question, but generally speaking, I'm all for bike lanes, and I believe that we have to try to make living in New York as manageable as possible for people who don't own cars and make it so that people don't feel like they need to own a car.
Thank you. Okay, I wanted to spread out the lightning round just to keep everybody on their toes. We have one last one. I'm going to ask it, and then at the end, you have a chance to plug in your website or your Twitter, whatever you want to plug in for people to learn more about your campaign. And the question is, even though you guys have been talking about bicycles, do you own a car, Mr. McGuire?
I do own a car, yes.
And go ahead and plug in whatever information you want for the viewers to learn more about your campaign.
Yeah, about my candidacy, if you think about the needs of this city and we focus on the economy, it's the economy. No jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. And so my vision is to make certain that we create and have the most inclusive economic comeback, no economic justice, no justice otherwise, in the history of this city. Number one. Number two, we need to focus on safety, security, and quality of life. Number three, we need to focus on education. To the extent that you're prepared to support the leadership of this city and me, go to rayformayor.com. Rayformayor.com. We welcome all New Yorkers, depending on race, creed, color, religion. We want all people who are focused on the greatest inclusive comeback in the history of New York City.
Thank you. Okay, let's remember to keep it quick to that website. Do you own a car, yes or no, Ms. Morales?
I lease a car that I am happily about to let go in 2 months. And so as for me, anyone who's interested in following me, all my social media handles are Diane, DIANNE, the number 4, NYC, or you can check out and get more information on our platform or get involved in volunteering or even make a contribution to support this grassroots people-powered campaign at Diane, DIANNE.NYC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Mr. Iskol, do you own a car, yes or no? And where can viewers learn more about your campaign?
I do own a car. My lease is actually also up in 2 months. I am not making that up. People can find me on Twitter or on Instagram at Zach Iskol, ZACHISCOL, or at our website, zachiscol.com, ZACHISCOL.com. Also, I just want to say thank you to the organizers of tonight. I think the one thing that the city really needs to come back is a great mayoral primary. The work that you did organizing this tonight is remarkable. I know it is like herding cats. All of us have had to organize a lot of Zoom events. How you pulled this off, I don't know, but bravo and really well done tonight. So thank you all for organizing this. It really is going to help bring the city back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yang, do you own a car, yes or no? And where can New Yorkers learn more about your campaign?
I do own a car. I moved into the city as a 21-year-old. And I finally bit the bullet and got a car at the age of 40. So I had like 19 years of subwaying and biking and walking around, and buying that car felt, it was tough, you know, but I do own a car. You can find out more about me and my campaign at andrewyang.com or Yang for New York, whatever you'd like. But let's bring the city back. Let's bring the city we love back, Brooklyn. We can do it. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Appreciate you, Gloria and Nee.
Thank you very much, candidates. I'm going to toss it over to Nye, who will pick up the next portion of the program.
Sorry about that, Nye. My fault.
Ed, before we go to the next group of people, I want to just make an announcement for them because I know that some of them may have not gotten to hear some of the things. So for the candidates coming to this section of the round robin, you will hear a sound like so when you have 15 minutes left in your question. So that's just a reminder that you have 15, and I keep saying 15 minutes, I mean 15 seconds, that you have 15 seconds to complete your answer. And we have on this next panel, we'll hear from Catherine Garcia, Carlos Menchaca, Lori Sutton, Sean Donovan, and Eric Adams, who I want to just reiterate was I know that he was supposed to be, or it was thought that he was in the first round. There was a miscommunication on our part. He was under the impression that he was coming at this time, so he is here at the time that he was here to be at. And one last reminder to the candidates speaking, we have simultaneous Spanish translation happening. So please slow down your speaking so that that can happen. Please put pauses in between sentences. And also, if you are reading from a pre-written script, you are probably talking too fast. So I will now hand it over to Nye for the last portion of this evening. Nye?
Thank you so much, Rich. And a reminder that if you are just joining us, to please select your preferred language on the Zoom by using the language button on the bottom right. Please select English or Spanish based on your preference. That includes our panelists, ergo the candidates that have just joined us. Okay, let's get started with this final group. Thank you to the more than 400 people that are still online with us. Now we are going to introduce a former Sanitation Commissioner, Catherine Garcia, a former Department of Veteran Services Commissioner, Ray Sutton, and a former Federal Housing Secretary, Sean Donovan, and of course, Brooklyn's own Borough President, Eric Adams. Each candidate would have 1 minute to introduce themselves. Of course, when you hear that bell, that means you have 15 seconds to wrap up and conclude your sentence. We're going to go ahead and get started with Mrs. Garcia. And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, do we also have Councilmember Carlos Menchaca with us here?
Presente.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember. Please forgive me. I didn't see you on my screen. So our final group, just to reiterate, we have Catherine Garcia, Carlos Menchaca, Lorraine Sutton, Sean Donovan, and Eric Adams. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask Mrs. Garcia to start with a 1 minute introduction. Be mindful of our time.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I am Catherine Garcia, and I am running for mayor. I am a lifelong Brooklynite, born and raised on the streets of Brooklyn. But what I have done over the last 14 years of my life is been accountable to you. You might not know my name, but you know my work. I have delivered you clean water. I have kept the harbor clean. I have taken away your trash, plowed your snow, and led the initiative on lead abatement for all children in the city of New York. I have been called on time and time again during a crisis to serve. During Hurricane Sandy, I served as the incident commander for the Department of Environmental Protection. And during COVID, I delivered over 130 million meals. My vision for New York is one where every family can have the same experience that I had, where every kid, no matter their zip code, can become whoever they damn want to be.
Amen to that. Next, I'm going to ask Mr. Menchaca to give his introductions.
Buenas noches, Brooklyn. I'm Carlos Menchaca, City Council Member representing Sunset Park and Red Hook, and I want to be your next mayor. I have had an incredible journey working in city government here in Brooklyn with the borough president, the city council speaker, and now as council member. And what I've learned is that this city needs courage that's unapologetic, courage that's going to take all these ideas that we're talking about in this forum and actually make them happen, confront every sector, including unions and the corporate sector, developers. My track record has been unapologetic, and I want to do that. But also in moments of crisis, I have sprung up, whether it was Sandy or in this recent pandemic that we're still in with 400,000 people who have died nationwide. We need someone that's going to stand up and work with mutual aid to ensure that we bring that kind of assistance to the people who are springing up in our communities and fighting for our immigrants, our working families. I will do that, and I hope this forum will give you a better understanding of who I am and why we need to work together in this ranked choice voting world to bring these ideas to fruition. I'm Carlos Menchaca, and I want to be your mayor.
Thank you so much. And General Sutton.
Hi, I'm Lori Sutton. I'm a lifelong public servant. Nearly 30 years, I had the privilege of serving in the United States Army, the most diverse institution on earth. They put me through medical school. I became a public health doctor and psychiatrist, as well as a hospital commander, White House fellow, professor, did all kinds of things. As my mother used to say, Lori, can't you ever hold a job? But it was an amazing experience, an immersion in leadership for those 30 years. And then for these last 5 years, was privileged to serve as the founding commissioner of the nation's first municipal agency devoted to the strengths and needs of veterans and their families. My reason for running for mayor, I deeply believe that the next mayor has got to, as a foundational just a foundational imperative, restore public safety, public health, open up businesses and schools, and bring common sense and sanity back to City Hall. I'd love to be your mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Donovan.
Thank you, Nye. And hello, Brooklyn. Coming to you from Boerum Hill, where I've raised my kids and lived most of my life. Look, I'm running for mayor because I grew up in a different time of crisis in this city. As a child, I saw homelessness exploding on our streets. I watched neighborhoods like the South Bronx crumble and even burn to the ground. And that lit a fire in me. I started volunteering in a homeless shelter. And after I finished school, I came back to rebuild those very same neighborhoods I saw burning as a child. That began a 30-year career of public service on the front lines, rebuilding from crisis. I was housing commissioner in this city in the wake of 9/11. When we were facing the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes in this country, President Obama asked me to serve as his HUD secretary. And when Sandy hit our shores, he asked me to lead our federal recovery efforts to build back better and stronger and safer. And then when he asked me to serve as his budget director, 3 weeks later, Ebola hit. And I went into the Situation Room with our military leaders, with Dr. Fauci, with the President Obama, Vice President Biden, and made sure that an emerging global threat didn't become a pandemic that cost tens of thousands of New Yorkers their lives. What I've learned in all those crises is that those who are most vulnerable before a crisis hits are always hurt the worst by it. That's why we need to make sure that in this recovery, we lead with rebuilding for those who are most vulnerable.
Thank you so
I
much.
want to be your mayor at this moment of crisis.
Thank you. Borough President Eric Adams.
Thank you, and good evening to all of the clubs that have joined tonight's forum. And I want to spend my 1 minute to say to all the clubs and all who are watching this forum, there are many things you can say about all of the candidates that are running for mayor, but there's one thing you can't say. You can't say we don't love the city. Each candidate has dedicated his or her life to New York City in one way or another. If it's Diana, Maya, Ray, Carlos, General Sutton, Scott, Sean, all of us. We're running for mayor because we refuse to sit on the sidelines and just complain about our state. We're willing to expose our families to a challenging and sometimes degrading next few months. You can only do this if you love the city. That's the love I have had every day when I put on a bulletproof vest and protect the children and families of the city. You won't agree with all of us, but guess what? I don't agree with myself all the time, but I agree that the city needs to move forward. Our city is dysfunctional, and the inefficiencies of the agencies are creating the inequalities that we are witnessing. I'm ready to make government work for New Yorkers. You deserve a hardworking mayor like you are hardworking citizens. I'm going to give you that.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to transition to our first question for this group. There are more than 500,000 undocumented immigrants living in New York City. Many of them pay taxes, are essential workers on the front lines, and have been helping to keep this city running in the middle of a global crisis. However, many of them do not qualify for the federal COVID relief programs and other benefits that have been distributed to New Yorkers. What will you do about this as mayor, and how can the city help support these individuals and their families, which have also been severely impacted, yet left out of nearly all of the recovery plans to date? I'm going to start with Mr. Donovan.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarity. I'm sorry, Sean. How much time do we have to answer each question?
2 minutes to respond, and you will hear a bell when you have 15 seconds left. When you hear that bell, please be concrete about completing your sentence or thought. We will allow that as time allows, but this is the last session of the evening, and we want to make sure that we get everyone in and our questions answered on time.
Thank you.
And before we start the round, I just want to ask that all the panelists select their language in the bottom right and remind you that this is being simultaneously translated. So please be mindful of that and keep your pace to slower so that everybody can appreciate what's going on here. Thank you.
Mr. Donovan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nye. This issue is deeply personal to me. My grandfather was one of 10 poor Irish kids who grew up on the south side of London. He worked the docks as a teenager, left for Africa and South America to work in the ports to try to make a way, made enough money to send my dad to school. He eventually came to the US to finish school and built a life here as an immigrant after growing up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru. After decades with a green card, when I became a cabinet member for President Obama, he came to me and said, "Sean, I'm ready." And I got to swear him in the Great Hall on Ellis Island with hundreds of other newly minted citizens from around the world. So I understand what it means for New York City to be a city of opportunity for immigrants, but I also have seen and worked with over my years in homeless shelters, in affordable housing, all across this country, with undocumented folks who have not been given the ability to lead and to be part of that New York experience in a full way. Tomorrow, we swear in President Biden and Vice President Harris. I have worked with them side by side, and I know that we can make progress on immigration in this country. But I also know that no matter what happens in Washington, we will have 300,000 undocumented folks without health insurance unless the next mayor expands health insurance to them. I would do that. I have a plan to do that. And I also know that it will be almost impossible for those families to build intergenerational wealth without a plan like my equity bonds, which I rolled out yesterday on Martin Luther King Day. It would provide $1,000 to every child, including undocumented children in this city. And for the poorest kids, by the time they finished high school, they would have $50,000 to be able to put to work to build a life of opportunity in this city.
Thank you so much. Borough President Adams. I think you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. The first thing we must do is stop treating this city as an English-only speaking city. We saw this through COVID. We saw it through other actions around the vaccine, and we continue to see how we communicate in this city. I would target those documented New Yorkers who are green card holders. We will push through and give them the right to vote. Oftentimes in their family, they have undocumented family members who are there. By giving the power and the strength to decide who you are electing, you are also given the possibility to participate in government. No one tells an undocumented person when they walk into a store and buy a loaf of bread, where is your green card, where's your documentation? You're charged the same taxes. We need to use those tax dollars to make sure that we give adequate health care, preventive care, and also utilize something that we push the city to do, and that's using technology. Technology in the areas of telemedicine, so that those who are undocumented can communicate with doctors and other healthcare professionals in the meantime. Utilizing those pre-existing entities like we did during the census time to communicate with people on the ground so they can learn about the access to services and to be sure that we have real services that are provided for those who are undocumented. We're doing a terrible job now and not allowing a better use of our municipal NYC card, the New York City identification card. We could utilize that card to give real information by putting a chip on the back to allow those who are undocumented to get real information that is available to them. We send far too much back to the federal government because we are not having an easy access to information and resources.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Catherine Garcia next.
Thank you. We need to be doing the first things first, which is ensuring that we are providing the vaccine to those communities that were particularly hardest hit. Those were often our immigrant communities that were undocumented. We have to use trusted community organizations to make the connection to those populations to ensure that they are getting the vaccine and not being left at the end of the line. During COVID, I gave out over 1 million meals a day. We had no screens on any of our programs on whether or not you were documented. Getting food was only that you were a human who needed it, nothing more than that. So there was no question on any of our programs about that. One of the positive things that they did actually in the CARES Act was what was called pandemic EBT, which also did not create a public charge and was available to all New York City children, regardless of documentation. So there was a $420 card that went to any family. We need to be pushing the federal government to do more programs when we're talking about health, food, and access. I believe that we need to continue to work with those community organizations that are trusted. But I also thought we saw some interesting things get done. Working with the public and private sector and those organizations, we were actually able to put direct cash into people's hands. And the last thing I would say is what we actually do for all of our residents, help them get their businesses back open, help them keep their jobs, and make sure that we are getting out of their way while they do it.
Thank you. Councilman Menchaca.
Thank you, Nye, for this question. My family is an immigrant family. My grandma, my mother, and my family crossed into El Paso, Texas. This question is very personal for me. So many of the families that I represent in the district and get to meet as the chair of the Immigration Committee has been incredibly hard for me right now to hold because of this pandemic. It has forced us to look at what we have done in the city, the state, and in this country. We have put immigrant lives to the side as non-citizens. And what we need to do is put them at the center of this relief, this economic relief, and have a plan to do that. One, we need to give all our immigrants the ability to vote for their leaders here in the city of New York. They are the center of the economy. When we think about the essential workers, it is the immigrants who have been risking their lives, and many of them dying secretly on the side without the kind of approach, dignity from this city, this state, and this federal government. It is time to turn the chapter on that. And we got to do what we have to do here in the city of New York, and the federal government will not do it anytime soon. And that's bringing immediate economic relief. And I'm talking about cash and checks to our undocumented and immigrants who are not eligible for this federal aid. And we can do that in this budget, not in 2022, but in 6 months. And I'll be asking candidates to support an injection of funding that brings them that immediate relief. The other thing I want to talk about is language access. So much of what the city does and what you are all in the middle of struggling with right now is engaging non-English speakers. The city has failed to commit to its own laws that we've passed in the city. And so as mayor, I will ensure that everything that gets translated comes out at once in all the languages that we're supposed to. This is not about budget. This is about leadership. We don't need a manager right now. We need a leader that can manage other people to ensure that we can get to all our immigrants. And the last thing I want to say about our immigrant community is that today, and many of them are listening tonight, are struggling to understand how they see themselves in this economy, in this government. And as the mayor, someone who speaks multiple languages can communicate. And that's what this government will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am going to go to General Sutton.
Thank you so much, Nye. You know, it's heartening to listen to the responses and to be so proud to live in a city where we care for all of our brothers and sisters, undocumented or not. I share Sean's optimism, and perhaps all of us, I hope all of us do. You know, it's been so devastating, both with the events, the attempted coup 2 weeks ago, and, you know, just every day brings something new as we wait for tomorrow, and not soon enough, but the new president, Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris. And I just have to say, to know that we will have a president, a vice president who will bring decency back to our country means the world. And I think that when it comes to our undocumented brothers and sisters here in New York City, let's be clear. Our city will not work without all of us. And that includes, and especially during these last many months now of the pandemic, our immigrants, many of them undocumented. I would say that any New Yorker, undocumented or otherwise, who has served at the front lines as an essential worker, putting themselves at risk, their families, their health, their well-being, their livelihoods, anyone who has done that deserves a path to citizenship. And as mayor, I would certainly lead the way in that effort. I would also lead the way with the new administration to advocate on behalf, finally, at last, of comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, secure borders. Yes, clear pathways to citizenship. And as someone who worked at the most diverse institution on earth, the United States Army, every country, every state, territory, so many countries and so many soldiers who joined the Army as a path to citizenship. This couldn't be more foundational, more important. And I look forward to leading that effort as the next mayor of New York City.
Thank you. And now we are going to mix things up. I like to have fun with a little rapid fire. So I like to throw in some questions that let us know a little bit more about you, but also kind of your vision, because we can't cover everything in our session. So something that's near and dear to many of the people here and the voters is, what are we going to do about our youth, our at-risk youth, many of whom are not able to attend school, particularly our teens. And there was a great debate this cycle about how we spend our funds through the summer youth program. So this is a really quick yes or no, 30-second. You can say yes or no and a very brief, I'm going to hold you to it, explanation of why you select it. But would you support having the summer youth program be an all-round program where our youth can get paid to work in different areas of our city government to help us rebuild post-pandemic? I'm going to start with Councilman Menchaca. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes. And it needs to be done in this budget in 6 months.
Great. Thank you. Catherine Garcia?
No, I really think that we need to pair our youth with the private sector as well as the nonprofit sector so that they are real opportunities for that first job.
Thank you so much. General Sutton?
Yes, I would take a both and position on this one. I think that there are private sector apprenticeships and pathways to careers, but I also think that there are whatever efforts that we can put together, whatever programs that can inspire and expose our youth to the richness of what our city has to offer. Absolutely. Let's go. Let's not wait. Let's not wait an extra day.
Thank you. Sean Donovan? Sean, you're on mute.
Absolutely, Nyan. As part of my comprehensive education plan that I rolled out a couple of weeks ago, I actually proposed a very specific way to do this with the New York City Recovery Corps for Education. We should put our young people to work, not only helping our students recover their education, but to deal with the trauma they've all been through this past year. That's part of what would be the largest apprenticeship program in the history of the city. And I would make sure every single student graduating high school has had at least one paid internship during that time.
Great, thank you so much. And Borough President Adams.
Yes, 100%. I know it personally. In high school, I went to co-op, had a job for 1 week, school for 1 week, was able to help mom pay for the mortgage, exposed me to new ideas. It was in an accounting firm. So it's a combination of spending time in a city agency and then put them inside a private corporation and then build out a robust internship program. Exposure, exposure, exposure.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to kick it over to my co-moderator, Gloria.
Thank you. I want to get over to our second question, and we're going to keep talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. And we just finally, for the first time, paused to remember every American that we lost to that virus for the first time tonight. So I want to ask for your vision of public health, because part of what we learned in this pandemic is some of what we already knew, that health disparities among Black and Brown New Yorkers left them more vulnerable to this virus. So Bloomberg took on smoking. De Blasio has tried to address mental health. What does your public health agenda look like? And what will you do specifically to address the historic racial disparities that continue to affect New Yorkers today? Ms. Garcia, I'm going to start with you. You guys have 2 minutes to respond.
It's good to see you, Gloria. My approach to public health is to really dig into the problem and look at it from the data. We know that there were huge disparities in Black and Brown neighborhoods in terms of the impact of COVID, both because of underlying health conditions, but also because of the housing that they lived in and being unable to quarantine from one another. Many of those people did have health insurance. They were eligible for Medicaid, they were eligible for Medicare, but their chronic illnesses were not being addressed. This means that we need to bring medical care to those communities in a systemic way and create transportation options so that they can get to the doctors. It is often very hard, and as we all know, Access-a-Ride is not reliable. And so people are not taking care of themselves even when they do have access. So my focus is on leveraging our clinics across the city that H&H has been putting together, but also reaching out to ensure that there's transportation so that that isn't the piece we're missing. And helping people, you know, we make everyone recertify for everything constantly. And then they can fall off of their eligibility for any of our programs through Metro Health or through any of the other programs the city runs. We need to assume that they still need it until they tell us they don't, rather than our presumption is you probably don't need this anymore. I don't think that somebody's in their 70s who's on Medicaid and Medicare is suddenly going to change and have a job making, $100,000 a year. It seems unlikely. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Menchaca, we'll go to you next. What is your vision for public health for the city?
Thank you, Gloria, for the question. And I think we've all learned a lot about COVID, and it's really changed the way that we understand what we need in times of emergencies. And so I want to talk about some of the ideas that I want to approach this next chapter. One of them is that COVID has given us the opportunity to understand that we can actually work from home. That's going to impact the economy and commercial. It's going to impact a lot of things. But I think what it's going to also do is allow us to think about healthcare in our neighborhoods and understand how we bring that back to our communities, and working with all the different clinics to ensure that they have the resources to be able to take care of people. But the other thing is that telemedicine has been one of those game changers in this pandemic. In Red Hook, we created a beautiful pilot that connected people who didn't have primary care, that were using emergency rooms, to a telemedicine experience. That is now something that is widely understood, and we need to bring more and double down with more funding for that. And the last thing I want to say is that we have to be brave in this conversation, in this mayoral race, and talk about removing healthcare from the workplace, from the job. And that's something that I think is an American conversation, but it is the city of New York with the resources and the ability for us to do that, and the bravery, the courage to be able to do that. And I think this city can make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, we'll go to you next. What is your vision for public health for the city of New York?
Thanks, Gloria. It's good to see you again. So when I announced my candidacy, I said that we need a mayor who understands that every issue is an equity issue. Public health is an equity issue. If you look at the disparities in life expectancy across racial groups in this city, between immigrants, particularly undocumented folks, and others, you will see very quickly that this is an equity issue at its core. And so much of this comes down to where people live. I've worked in housing and communities all my life, and I've seen over and over again that is the environmental factors that make public health disparities such a crushing problem in this city and in this country. That's why I've proposed what I call 15-minute neighborhoods. Now, for many New Yorkers in wealthy neighborhoods, they know what a 15-minute neighborhood looks like. Everything that they need to get ahead is within 15 minutes. That's the way New York should be for every New Yorker. Every New Yorker should have the ability to find a good job, transportation to that job. They should be able to find a place to buy fresh food, a hospital, emergency mental health care, all of the things that make it possible for them to get the health care they need. And they should have a good park, open spaces for their kids to play, for them to walk without feeling threats to their safety. All of those are central parts of what creates a 15-minute neighborhood and what will close the health disparities that face this city.
Thank you. General Sutton, we'll go to you. Your vision for public health for the city of New York.
Sure. Thank you so much, Gloria. You know, as a public health doc and a psychiatrist leading for many years in the Army, both in combat as well as on the home front, and witnessing at close hand what it means to make an investment in public health, taking that experience to the city. You know, yes, it's about quality healthcare that's accessible and that's culturally congruent and available, easily available to the most underserved and difficult to access neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that we've seen during this pandemic that have been disproportionately sickened by this virus and who have suffered and paid disproportionately with their lives. I think that my vision for public health, actually, it's phased. We have to make the investments before the pandemic arrives. That means we have to invest in electronic healthcare records so that our public and our private hospital systems are interoperable, and that we make the provision so that we're not sharing HIPAA or private information with folks who shouldn't have it. But we should be able, for example, just in these last few days, we should be able to know how many vaccines have been delivered in New York State and by whom. We've just gotten a point in time version of this last couple of days, but we need to make that investment. We also need to make an investment in the kind of, the testing and the tracing core. We shouldn't be standing up that in the middle of a crisis, and we certainly shouldn't be transferring ownership from one institution, DOH has the depth expertise to the public hospital system. There are lots of things that we need to be doing to make that investment, make sure that we've established those relationships before the pandemic arrives, so that we never find ourselves in this situation again.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, I know health overall is a subject that is near and dear to your heart, so I want to hear some specifics, very specific, about what your view, what your agenda is for public health.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Well, first, I want to take the moment to really state it is embarrassing that the city has yet to tell us the ethnic demographics of those who were given the vaccine. That should be in real time. I say over and over again, and you're going to hear it throughout the campaign, we spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place, and health is one of those areas. We need to stop feeding the crises. I'm going to institute my Bellevue project, the first of its kind in America, lifestyle medicine. You go into a hospital with a chronic disease, you should have the option, if you want to have a lifestyle regimen to reverse your chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, hypertension, or if you want to go on the pharmaceutical direction, you should have the option to do so. That's going to be in every health and hospital system. We're going to expand telemedicine. It took me 2 years in a COVID pandemic before the city health and hospital system heard me and instituted what we're seeing now, one of the largest telemedicine operations possible. We're going to wean people off the emergency room as their primary care. We're going to show people that preventive actions can actually impact the underlying cause. We're going to stop feeding our babies food that is causing the diseases that we're fighting for. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene spend millions of dollars to fight childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma, yet the Department of Education, they're feeding our children 960,000 meals a day that cause childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma. We're going to stop that. Government should not feed the crises. We will have a healthy city by being an upstream city around healthcare.
Thank you. I want to touch on vaccination because some of you brought it up, and all of you have an idea of what it's like inside municipal government, what it takes to put something into work. So during a during a smallpox outbreak, I'm sure you've heard of this, back in 1947, the city somehow managed to vaccinate 6 million people in less than a month. Now, here we are all these years later, city and state officials are still unable to tell us how this is all going to work out. The process has not been smooth. People are having a hard time booking their appointments. It's unclear what's happening with vaccination supply on the day-to-day. So I want to ask you specifically, if you were in charge of this now, what would you be doing differently to make sure that the vaccination process would work out better? Let's start with Mr. Donovan.
Gloria, this is an issue that touches all of us directly. I was literally on the phone with my father, who turned 80 just a few weeks ago, who's been through, and my mother-in-law, who's been through the confusion, the disruption, the uncertainty about this issue. And I also remember exactly the same leadership failure back in the spring. And for me, the most disturbing decision I saw this mayor make was when his health commissioner, Oxiris Barbeau, told him the truth. He got upset and took away contact tracing and testing from the best health department in the world, and it cost New Yorkers their lives. For me, the most dangerous thing any leader can do is surround themselves with people who won't tell them the truth. We've seen that in our White House the last 4 years, and we've seen it, unfortunately, in City Hall. Leading is about surrounding yourself with people who know what they're doing and will tell you the truth, and you will make decisions that actually direct the resources of government where they are needed. You bring the data together. That is what I have done in a decades-long career in public service. It's why President Obama asked me to lead the $4 trillion budget and go to work making sure that Ebola and Zika and many of the other potential pandemics that hit this country didn't cost tens of thousands of lives. That's the kind of leadership that I've provided. It's the kind of leadership that I would provide as mayor that would make sure that we're getting vaccines to every one of our at-risk folks as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. You know, you were often called on when the city was in the middle of a crisis to do a whole array of things, and most recently to make sure that food insecure New Yorkers had access to meals during the pandemic. What would you be doing differently in this moment to make sure that the vaccination process was going differently?
Yeah, it's been absolutely shameful that we did not have a plan in place for vaccinating everyone. I mean, eventually we will actually vaccinate everyone. So in groups, who goes first, but eventually we needed a full plan. The first thing I would do is we know where our most vulnerable are. We know who is hit the hardest by COVID. We know that they have connections either through the food program. I mean, I delivered 130 million meals. We can deliver 8 million vaccines. You need to use the resources you have and that you can deploy. So for seniors who have home attendants, who we know where they live, we could have scheduled all of their appointments and used a mobile van. We should use the public schools where there are school nurses in almost every building, and everyone can walk to a school building to get their vaccine. I don't know what is going on with the technology and the fact that there are 3 websites, and someone is asking my father when he goes on whether or not he's a migrant worker. There's a slew of information being requested that is unnecessary. Are you over 80? Are you not over 80? Are you essential worker or not an essential worker? And moving through these in waves as we get supply from the federal government. But there's so much we could have leveraged from our community organizations, the senior housing. Like, we know where senior housing is, we built it. We know where people who are homebound are, we pay for that through Medicaid. So we didn't use any of the things that we had to make this effective. And not only for what we're doing now, we don't know what the plan is for the rest. Sanitation workers are not yet essential workers. Sewage treatment workers are not yet essential workers. When are the kids going and how will we do that? All of these are things that really need to be, they really needed to have been fleshed out yesterday. It is so doable, but they're not they are not doing it. And I agree with the borough president. There should be complete transparency about where the vaccinations are going. And it shouldn't be like going and getting a concert ticket and how long you're willing to stay on hold is who gets to go see, Prince and the Revolution. Dating myself a little bit.
Thank you. I wish I could have been there. Mr. Adams, what would you be doing differently in this moment to reassure New Yorkers that they will get their vaccine when their turn comes up, and those who are trying to get it now because they qualify are actually able to do so in a simple, accessible manner? You're on mute.
First thing, again, I think everyone on this call needs to put out an immediate call to the mayor and the governor to immediately release the data that shows the ethnicity of those who we issued a vaccine and were they New Yorkers, New York City residents, or worked here. That needs to be done. I will do what 20 other elected officials has asked the city and state to do. Follow my plan. The first thing I would do as mayor, I would travel to Albany, close the door at the governor's mansion and sit down and say, listen, it's time for us to come together. The people of this city must see the leaders side by side at the highest executive level. Then I will implement a clear 3-color coded system. Red is for our high individuals in the high risk areas. Yellow is for those who are the other groups that we classified as being 1B, and green is for the general public. Why would I do that? Clarity, consistency, communication. Just as we use the terrorist alert, we use a 3-color coded system that everyone understood. When you use a simple system, we won't continue to hold up the line. Where the snag is that some people in the high risk areas were refusing to take the vaccine. And we were holding up the entire process until they were willing to take it. No, let's already have a list so that we can go to the next area, the 1B area, and then green to the general public. Because there's 2 goals, Gloria. There's the goal of high risk individuals receiving the vaccine, and the other goal is herd immunity. We need to move to both goals together, and we failed to do that. By following the plan that I laid out would allow us to accomplish both those goals, and we would do it in real time technology to ensure we get in the right zip codes and the right ethnicity in those high need areas.
Thank you. Mr. Menchaca, to your plan next, what would you be doing differently in this moment to ensure New Yorkers could have access to the vaccine?
Thank you, Gloria. I think what is really important here is that we're trying to build a public health crisis response on top of a house of cards, a government that has no relationship with its community. And so any message that we give out, any plan that we pull out right now is going to be met with distrust. And so we have an emergency moment right now. And so the first thing that I would do is bring the people who actually are trusted by our communities, promotoras, healers, nonprofit organizations that have community ties that are bonded. And we learned a lot of this through our census task force. I'm the co-chair of the census task force in the city council, and we brought over $40 million to the city of New York. After the mayor said no to the money, we said, take this, and we're gonna need it. And thankfully, we needed it. And we were able to get to good, acceptable responses from levels from 2010. That's the same kind of model. Let's bring the people who are trusted by our communities to bring an engagement process so that people want to take the vaccines. As I'm talking to people in our neighborhoods, there are people that don't want to take the vaccine. That is where we need to be spending a lot more time, because what I do know is that the Biden administration will change the way that we get access to the vaccine. He will do a massive purchase, and the city will be bringing it out. The city and our private sector, including CVS and other pharmacies, will have enough vaccine. The problem will be that people will not want to take it because they do not trust it. And there are communities that have reasons to not trust a vaccine right now. And so our goal right now should be to engage communities and let them know it is not just safe, it is imperative to opening up the economy and bringing us back to normalcy in this city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Menchaca. And General Sutton, what would you do in this moment that isn't being done by the current administration to ensure that New Yorkers can have access to the vaccine?
Sure. Listen, thanks so much, Gloria. I agree with many of the things that have already been said. I'd like to highlight, Carlos, I couldn't agree more with your point about the pandemic having highlighted the limitations of employer-based healthcare, as well as the importance of trusted community leaders who can help build those bonds of trust. I will say this, this gets back to the investment in public health before the crisis hits, but even early on to be able to take those actions. Back in March, I reached out to the governor's office and said, I've had a little bit of military experience, operations, combat, public health. I'll put my campaign on pause and come work for your team. What we need to do is we need to set up health safety hubs where New Yorkers can safely quarantine those who are living in conditions where they can't quarantine, or other members have been exposed, where they can be monitored safely and given the nutrition and the access to care and to all of the social determinants of health that are so important. And if they need further medical care, then they can be safely transported without overwhelming our healthcare system. We squandered the use of the Navy ship that came in. We squandered the use of the Javits Center. I am hopeful that perhaps this time around, albeit belatedly, we can put the Javits Center to better use, but we have to have community-based alternatives that prevent us from doing what I've done these last 2 weeks, and that is to work with New Yorkers who, as many of us have described, whether it's family members or fellow New Yorkers, neighbors, but you call the state number and it's offline. You try to get in through the DOHMH website and they ask you so many damn questions, and then you get just into a do loop where then at the end, the first appointment is in June. Come on now. We're better than this. As you said, 1947, 6 million vaccines. We can do this. If just the 5 of us on this call were in charge of this, it'd have been done already. And I'll tell you, Catherine, if you'd stayed in city government, you would have become the vaccine czar and we'd all be in a better place.
Thank you, General Sutton. I am going see, that's what ranked choice voting does. Everybody's so nice to each other. I want to ask a lightning round question just to make sure we're all staying on our feet and paying attention. This is a very controversial question. Don't get this wrong. Social media will come after you. What is your favorite New York City movie? And I am going to start with the board president, Eric Adams. Your favorite New York City movie?
New Jack City.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Donovan?
Serpico.
Interesting. Ms. Garcia?
Appropriate for our times, right, Gloria?
I'm going to go with Spider-Man.
Which one?
The one where we had to do the Twin Towers over again. Can't remember which number it is. So not the more recent ones. I haven't Marvel come in a while.
Mr. Menchaca?
My favorite, Ghostbusters, all the way.
General Sutton, your favorite New York City movie?
Out of Towners. A little comedy could help right now.
Thank you very much. Another really, really important question, and this may make or break your Brooklyn vote, and that is your favorite Brooklyn slice. Is it DeFara's or is it Spumoni Gardens? Mr. Adams?
Neither. I go to a nice vegan pizza place in Williamsburg.
What is it?
I don't recall the name. I know where to go when I get off the train.
Okay. Miss General Sutton, which slice would you go get if you could right now? DeFara's or L&B?
Listen, I'm going to Mexican food. I'm going to Amaranto's. That's my place on Hart Street, hands down.
No pizza. Okay, I don't think you can be mayor if you don't like pizza.
Yeah, I love pizza.
Mr. Menchaca, which slice do you prefer, DeFara's?
Okay, you have to come to Red Hook. There's this beautiful space right over here on Valentino by Valentino Pier called Hook, H-O-E-K. Best slice, and they have a vegan slice as well.
Okay, Mr. Donovan.
So our family tradition on our stoop on Bergen Street every Sunday, Liza and the boys and I would get a Grimaldi's pizza and eat it on the stoop, catching up with our neighbors. So it'll always be Grimaldi's for me. Even if they're no longer around, it is my favorite slice.
Okay, but I appreciate the qualifier at the end because not everybody knows that it's not the original anymore. Thank you. Ms. Garcia, what's your favorite slice in Brooklyn?
I'm going old school, LV.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Nycha for our next question.
So the last question of the evening is one that I know is very important to our voters in Brooklyn, and it is about climate. So it's been a little over 8 years since Hurricane Sandy made landfall in New York City, killing 43 people and causing more than $20 billion in damage. Yet officials who represent waterfront communities agree that not enough has been done to update the city's infrastructure, prepare our 520 miles of coastline, and put resiliency plans into action that can withstand another storm. What is your plan for ensuring the city is prepared? And please be specific by naming one policy that you would implement for tangible progress on this front. You have 2 minutes each to respond. I'm going to start with Mr. Donovan.
Thanks, Nycha. As I said earlier, Sandy was something that impacted me very personally, not only because I have friends and neighbors who lost their homes, lost their businesses, but President Obama called me. I was in City Hall meeting with leaders here and asked me to lead the federal recovery efforts to rebuild faster, better, and stronger. And in record time, I worked with Chuck Schumer and our leaders in Congress to get $60 billion to put to work in this city. And I have to say, one of the reasons that I'm running for mayor is the frustration that I felt that money was not put to work as quickly as it needed to be. I put out a comprehensive climate plan that would make sure that we actually get that work done. And specifically, what I laid out is a very equity-focused plan that would put substantial money into making sure that our public housing, so much of which is vulnerable, like in South Brooklyn and in Queens. The Rockaways was one of the hardest hit places by Sandy. And just a few weeks ago, I was there and saw a sign for Sandy retrofits that have not yet been completed. We have to accelerate the protection of our public housing. We do have to work with communities that are in harm's way to move them and ensure that we are retrofitting those communities. That's something that I did as HUD secretary. I led a worldwide competition called Rebuild by Design to bring the best designers, the best architects, the best scientists to work side by side with communities, with leaders like Damaris Reyes in the good old Lower East Side. And we need to accelerate and improve those kind of community efforts and make them citywide to reimagine our shoreline to better protect this city.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams next.
Keep putting myself on mute. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I have a saying, and I will continue to say this: if you don't inspect what you expect, it's all suspect. There's a problem in our city that we do a scatter and pray. We must embrace real-time technology, similar to what you see taking place in Boston around the city score, to gauge where we're going and what direction. Are we on target?
You're back on mute.
You're on mute, Eric. If you could please unmute, we missed a part of that.
Thank you. I encourage Build It Back program to keep communities updated on the status of projects and held government accountable by a system that they put in place. And it's imperative for us to, number one, I will invest in the green infrastructure through the city's capital program. It's a win-win. It's dollars that won't impact our immediate budget. It would allow us to put people back to work immediately, and it would deal with the fortification of our shorelines, particularly in the southern part of Brooklyn, parts of Queens, parts of the Bronx, that are along the waterfront and the water edge. We need to think differently about how do we have real green jobs in our infrastructure, in our CUNY system, in our college systems, and it's important to lead from the front. But in order to see where we are and where we're going, we need to map out a plan using a GIS mapping system to see how far we're moving forward in the right direction to address our climate issues, particularly along our shorefronts.
Thank you. Catherine Garcia?
Thank you for that question. Hurricane Sandy, which actually was technically not a hurricane when it came on shore, means that what we could confront could be worse or could be very different. We might be impacted by a Hurricane Harvey, which dropped 54 inches of rain on Houston. We could be impacted by a Hurricane Floyd, which impacted the Northern Bronx and North Queens. We need a 5-borough resiliency plan that uses a combination of both hard and soft infrastructure to deal with the possibility of not only storm surge, but also interior flooding, almost an inability to drain ourselves moving forward. This can be done with a combination of rain gardens that have gone in many places, green roofs across the city, particularly on public buildings that might not be suitable for solar, because they also insulate and keep it cooler. We can use tax incentives to get that done. We've done it before. We also need to be better prepared. Over the summer, Eastern Queens was hit by a tropical storm that took down so many trees that they did not have power for a week during a heat wave in a pandemic. That is uncomfortable and annoying if you're healthy. That is dangerous if you are elderly. We were not prepared to respond to that. We need to make sure that our emergency management is capable of dealing with what are called the black swan events. The ones you haven't done before. If you've done them before, you probably have a plan. We need to be planning for the unexpected with climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Menchaca?
Thank you, Nycha, for this question. And as the council member representing Red Hook and Sunset Park, I have a big waterfront community and have been embedded in a way that was the reason why I ran for office in the first place, because of Superstorm Sandy that devastated Red Hook. And from that, we learned a couple things. One is that resiliency isn't just about supporting everything that you just heard tonight, infrastructure, rain gardens, and solar and wind. We just celebrated the offshore wind that's coming to South Brooklyn at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. All those things are incredible for a just transition. The Climate Mobilization Act, the largest of its kind, that really needs to be implemented by the next mayor, and I will do that, requires the concept of a municipal Green New Deal, where the city of New York brings in hundreds of billions of dollars to the things that we're all talking about to have any impact whatsoever here in the city of New York. Those are the things that need to be bold and strong and necessary. And some of that can be done in 6 months in this next budget. I will be calling on the mayoral candidates and city council candidates to commit to ensure that this city council does right by the city of New York. But it's also about the resiliency of people. And when people come together, mutual aid is an example of what we need to do to ensure that when mutual aid sprouts up, that we support the mutual aid that's coming out of our neighborhoods, where neighbors are helping neighbors. That's the kind of resiliency that we all often forget. And the way that we do that is to ensure that people have what they need, and a universal basic income to ensure that people are being able to pay rent, being able to have food, can support each other in times of crisis, when their homes are devastated, or when there's a big fire, or whatever climate change is going to be throwing at us. Those are the things that that's how I would approach this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. General Sutton.
Thanks so much, Carlos. I like what you just said about resilient communities are, they're really peopled by resilient individuals and families and neighborhoods, and resilient cities are peopled with resilient communities and neighborhoods. And you can extend that to the state, to the regional level, to the national level. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that neighbors helping neighbors is a huge part of this, but it's not everything. And we know, as has been mentioned, the things that have fallen short, the Build It Back disappointments, the things that are still in progress or haven't gotten reached. I would say this, one of the last appointments I had before I left my position as Commissioner of the Department of Veteran Services, when I sat down with the relatively new commissioner for the Department of Emergency Management, Deanne Criswell. I'll tell you, what a force of nature. And I would want to sit down with her. She's just been nominated to serve as the first woman leader of FEMA. And I don't want to sit down with Deanne and say, listen, you've been here for 2 years at New York. You weren't here during Superstorm Sandy, but you've been dealing with a lot of the aftermath. So what do we need to do? Do we need to, as one facet of this, should we renew a global competition, as Sean said, and see where we are? Should we re-look from the bottom up? Let's look at where we are and how much progress we've made with the resilient cities and all that's been done over the last now, what has it been, 12 or 8 going on 9 years? But for sure, we've got to take a systems approach that recognizes that this is not a city-specific issue, because, climate and water and disease, it crosses boundaries, and we've got to take a statewide and a regional approach, and I look forward to doing it. I'm so glad that President Biden has made this such a priority in his administration.
Thank you all. So now we're going to close with some fun rapid fire questions. Again, just to get some more insights about the persona behind the campaign, or the person behind the persona of the campaign. And so I'm just going to go kind of round robin, so be ready. Some of these will be fun and some of them will be topical. So you want to make sure that you listen closely. First one is for fun. Are you a cat or a dog person? Catherine Garcia?
Dog.
Carlos Menchaca?
Dog.
General Sutton?
Big time dog.
Eric Adams?
Both, but I love my dogs.
Sean Donovan?
Cat, come on, where is everyone? I can't believe I'm on with all
That's
dog lovers.
controversial. We're going to break Twitter.
Sorry,
Sean. So be careful. Next question, and this one is an important one. You're going to really be able to say yes or no, and then you can give a very brief, like 10-second explanation if you need to qualify something. So will you support the millionaire's tax? Eric Adams?
Yes, 5 million or more for a 2 to 3 year period to cycle us out of this budget deficit.
Thank you. Catherine Garcia?
My first step would not be to raise taxes. I'm very concerned about stabilizing our tax base, because I think many of the people in that tax bracket have left.
Sean Donovan?
First of all, I would support getting rid of the Trump tax cuts. I worked hard against them, and we need to do that. We also need to get as much help as we possibly can from Washington, D.C. I'm best positioned of all the candidates to do that. And only in that case would I support a temporary charge to be able to help us come back.
Carlos Menchaca?
Yes. The rich have profited from this pandemic. We have to tax the rich, and we got to do it because people have been suffering. And so absolutely yes.
And General Sutton?
We can't tax our way out of this. It may be after we've exhausted every other option that we may need to put in a temporary surcharge. Certainly those who have done well during this pandemic, and I'm talking with a number of them now who'd be fine with that, but we cannot lead with thinking that we can tax our way to recovery.
And for those who are our housing enthusiasts who've been texting me this whole time, I'm gonna ask a rapid fire housing question that came up earlier. And it is, what was the last public housing Nycha complex that you have visited and when? Sean Donovan?
Wow, I've been, I was in Astoria houses. I've been in about 6 in the last month.
Catherine Garcia?
Howard Houses yesterday.
General Sutton,
Queensbridge,
Right.
3 weeks ago.
Carlos Menchaca,
Red Hook Houses yesterday.
Eric Adams,
Red Hook on Friday spoke with Mr. Lilly, the tenant leader, association president.
Great. I think I've gotten everybody. So I'm going to kick it back over to Gloria to see if there's any other rapid fire questions on the list that she would like to ask.
I'm looking at my list. You all left me disappointed with the New York City movie. So I want to ask you guys if you will be willing to commit to riding the subway at least once a week if you are elected mayor. Sean, let's go to you first.
Every day. I've already committed. Every day.
Commissioner Garcia.
I will ride it to City Hall every day, unless I'm going somewhere else that I can't get there, but I'm committed to taking the R train.
Mr. Menchaca, sorry, I dipped back into my first name. Mr. Menchaca, at Subway, would you ride the subway at least once a week if elected mayor?
Yes, I don't own a car. I ride a bike everywhere. I use public transportation. Absolutely.
Mr. Adams.
Every day, our transit system is the best way to get around the city. Every day, I love seeing people down there. They love seeing me down there every day.
So I just want to ask each and every one of you if you could.
We didn't hear from General Sutton. I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Go ahead, Nycha.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Everyone's screens are changing. I keep getting the interpreter popping up on my screen, probably reminding me to talk more slowly. Before we close out, I want to give each candidate an opportunity to please share your website with our audiences. We have over 1,000 people watching on Facebook and YouTube, in addition to the nearly 500 that were here with us on this Zoom. So we want to make sure that everyone knows how they can read more about your policies, your bios, and your plan to help our city recover. So I'm going to go to Eric Adams first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this forum. My website is ericadams2021.com. My Twitter handle is Eric Adams for New York City. This is extremely exciting, and I'm looking forward to moving the city in its right direction.
Great. Thank you so much. Carlos Menchaca.
You can follow me on Instagram at Menchaca, Twitter at cmenchaca. You can find me on Facebook website where you can give me a grassroots donation if you like anything that you heard today. I'm going to be needing those small grassroots donations. Carlos2021.com.
Great. Thank you. General Sutton.
Thanks so much. Lori for mayor.nyc. Twitter handle, Lori Sutton NYC. You can get access to all of my social media on the website. My public safety plan was published 2 weeks ago, the day before the attempted coup. We've got our open for business plan coming up early next week. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Catherine Garcia.
So you can find me at kg4fornyc.com. And my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter are all KG4NYC. And I do hope that you will visit the website and make a donation if you are able to.
Great. Sean Donovan.
Thanks, Nye. Right here over my left shoulder, Sean for NYC. On social media, Sean Donovan NYC. And we are running the campaign of ideas. Every week, we've been rolling out a comprehensive plan on another issue. We've done education, transportation, climate, and we've got more to come. So please take a look under priorities. And Nye, I just want to say thank you for making sure Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be inaugurated tomorrow. You rock.
Thank you so much. That was very sweet of you. I just want to say a quick thanks before I kick it over to Gloria. Thank you to Rich, to Akel, to Allison, to all of the candidates that have been with us this evening, to all of the grassroots groups and Democratic clubs, as we shift our focus from the national election, which many of you worked with us on, to our local elections. We know it is up to us to be the change we wish to see. So I look forward to being with you all in Zoom rooms every night of the week from now until June, as we partner to correct the course of our beloved city and band together to fight for the future of the greatest city in the world. I also want to invite you all, if you're so interested, to join New York for Biden-Harris tomorrow. If you go to our website, newyorkforbidenharris2020.com, we invite you to join us at 6:30 for an inauguration toast. We'll be joined by DNC Vice Chairman Michael Blake, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, and other special guests. And on Thursday, we will be doing a Facebook Live with many great speakers to explain ranked choice voting to everyone, because we do know that ranked choice voting is starting this year with the February special election for City Council. I'm going to kick it over to Gloria.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I don't have any plugs except to tell you guys about Inside City Hall. That is where you can watch me and my colleagues every night covering municipal government, and we will be covering this election every step of the way. So follow us there. I want to thank everyone who participated tonight and those of you who asked us to help you lead this conversation. And I look forward to hearing much more in the next couple of months.
We're going to kick it over to Rich.
Thank you. Thank you to you both. You know, I had just read on Twitter, somebody wrote that Nye Whitaker and Gloria Pazmino are kicking ass and they should be the next moderators for the next presidential debate, with which I want to say I agree, but I also want to say, please God, no presidential debate anytime soon. Let's just kick back and do what we're doing now and wait for that. So thank you again, Nye and Gloria. Thank you to all the candidates who came. Thank you to everybody who attended, especially. Thank you for all who stayed on for the entire event. Yes, we had about 500 people on this Zoom call, plus about 1,000 simultaneously on YouTube and Facebook, and a lot of people tweeting with the hashtag Brooklyn BK Mayoral Forum. So I think that everybody needs to stick around for this, the most important part of this, which is where we discuss and talk about all of the people behind the scenes that made this happen. So I want to give a special thanks to Leah Minkoff and Anya Chalmers from Persist BK, who organized our graphics, our copy, and social media outreach. Also, a special thanks to Erica Cohen, who coordinated run of show and candidate outreach. Special thanks to Akel Williams, who coordinated and got so many of our co-sponsors to participate. This is only such a big event because he got all these people on board. Jenny Spector and Liat Olenek of Indivisible Nation BK, who coordinated our press outreach. And a big thanks to the people behind the scenes, Ben Theodore and Julio Peña, the techs, and Irene Gotera and Cordelia Montes, our translators. I also want to recognize the people and groups who were on the planning committee. That's Max Roland Davidson and Christina Das of Brooklyn Young Democrats, Karen Wang and Allison Mingus of Women's Health and Reproductive Rights, Jared Arader and Lambda Independent Democrats, Joe Coletti and Jason Shelley of Independent Neighborhood Democrats, Jessica Thurston of New Kings Democrats, who I want to thank especially for being moderator for the first section, Nomi Rabia and Ellen Belofsky of South Central Brooklyn United for Progress, and thanks to all of the groups who co-sponsored, that is 500 Men Making a Difference, Bay Ridge Democrats, Brooklyn Resident Community Council, Brooklyn United for Biden-Harris, New York for Biden-Harris, North Brooklyn Progressive Democrats, Protect Sunset Park, Real Action Community Democrats, Strategy for Black Lives, Sunset Park Latino Dems, and Unified Political Association. I hope that this was as enjoyable for you as it was for all of us. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you had a great time. Good evening.